Hello there, and welcome back to another evening together. I hope wherever you are right now, you've got the lights down and nothing urgent left in the day. Tonight we're going to spend a good long while inside one particular show, and I've been looking forward to this one for months. Here's where I want to start, because it's the fact that reframed the whole thing for me. Breaking Bad almost didn't happen. And I don't mean that in the way every show almost doesn't happen, where someone nearly got a different note from a different executive. I mean the man who created it walked out of the meeting that greenlit it and privately assumed the thing was dead. He thought it was a pleasant chat. He thought they'd said nice things about his script because that's what people say. He went home and got on with his life, fully expecting nothing. And I love that. I love it because there is now a bronze statue of Walter White standing in a real city in New Mexico. And it exists because a man in his late 30s had a phone call with an unemployed friend about putting a meth lab in a camper van. And neither of them was being serious. So that's tonight. We're going to take our time and go all the way through this world. Not the plot though, I want to be clear about that up front. You've seen the plot. You know what happens to Walter White. You know roughly how it ends, and honestly, watching me summarize 5 seasons of television at you for 3 hours would be a bit of a waste of both our evenings. What I want to do instead is wander through the rooms of it, how the show got made and how many networks turned it down. The city it accidentally became about, and it really was an accident. The people, Walt, obviously, but also Jesse and Skyler, who took an absolute battering from the audience for reasons that say more about us than about her, and Hank, who started out as a joke and ended up being the most honest character in the whole thing. The Salamancas, Gus Fring, and the enormous amount the show deliberately refuses to tell you about him. The chemistry, which had a real professor behind it, working for free. The craft, which is where I could genuinely lose an entire night. And then everything that came afterwards, which is still going. Actually, there's a book coming later this year that I'm quietly very excited about. The sections don't build on each other, that's on purpose. Each one sits on its own, so if you drift off somewhere around the fried chicken, you haven't missed a payoff. There isn't one, there's just more of this. If you like these and want more of them, subscribing helps me keep making them. That's the whole ask. I'll not mention it again. One small thing before we get going, just so you know what you're in for. I'm not going to be dramatic tonight. There's no build. There's no moment I'm saving for the end where it all comes together, because it doesn't come together. It's a show. It's already finished. And everything I know about it, I know at the same time as everything else. So this is going to meander. I'm going to go off on things. There are at least 2 points tonight where I get slightly worked up about a supporting character, and I'd apologize in advance, except I won't mean it. And I should say I've watched this show enough times that I've stopped being able to tell you whether it's actually as good as I think it is. That's a real problem with the things you love. At some point, the thing and your memory of the thing fuse together, and you can't separate them out anymore. So take everything I say tonight as the opinion of a compromised witness, right? Let's start with the show that shouldn't exist. Vince Gilligan was born in Richmond, Virginia in 1967. His mom was a school teacher, his dad was an insurance claims adjuster, and the two of them divorced when he was 7. He grew up in Farmville in Chesterfield County, and he went to a school called J.P. Wynn, which was a laboratory school attached to the local college where his mother taught. Hold on to that name for a second. J.P. Wynn. Because when Gilligan needed a name for the high school, where a mild-mannered chemistry teacher would slowly lose his mind, he reached back into his own family and used the middle name of his father, James Wynn Gilligan. Walter White teaches at J.P. Wynn High School. It's a small thing, but it tells you something about how this man builds. He doesn't invent from nothing. He reaches for what's already lying around. His big break was The X-Files. He was a fan of the show, wrote a script on spec, sent it to Fox, and it became a 2nd season episode called Soft Light. That was the door. He went on to write 30 episodes of that show and produce a great many more, and he co-created a spin-off called The Lone Gunman, which ran for exactly one season of 13 episodes and then disappeared, as spin-offs tend to. And that's roughly where he was in the mid-2000s, a respected television writer with a good run behind him and nothing particularly on. Which brings us to the phone call. The origin story of Breaking Bad is genuinely the stupid, and I mean that as the highest possible compliment. Gilligan was on the phone with Thomas Schnauz, another writer he'd known since film school, and both of them were out of work. They were doing the thing you do when you're unemployed and slightly frightened, which is joking about what you'd do instead. And one of them said something like, well, maybe we should just buy an RV and cook meth in it and drive around the country. That's it. That's the seed. A joke between two skint writers. But Gilligan, being Gilligan, hung up the phone and couldn't stop turning it over. And what he eventually landed on wasn't the RV. It was the 4-word pitch that would follow him for the rest of his career. Mr. Chips into Scarface. Now, if you're not familiar, Mr. Chips is the kindly old schoolmaster from a 1934 novel called Goodbye, Mr. Chips, the softest, gentlest teacher in English literature. And Scarface can mean Al Capone or it can mean Tony Montana, and either way, it means a man who has gone all the way over. So the pitch is, I want to take the nicest man in the world and turn him into the worst one on camera slowly. And I want you to watch every step. I think it's one of the great pitches. And not because it's clever, it's because it's 4 words long and it tells you the entire show. There's no mystery box in it, no hook, just a promise about a direction of travel. And here's the bit underneath it that I think is actually the innovation, and it's got nothing to do with drugs. Gilligan has talked about this in interviews for years. He noticed that television is historically brilliant at keeping its characters in a kind of self-imposed stasis. It has to be. If your show is a hit, you want it to run for a decade. And it can't run for a decade if the main character keeps fundamentally changing. So everyone resets by the end of the episode. Everyone goes back in the box. And Gilligan looked at that and thought, well, what if the fundamental drive of the show was change itself? What if the engine wasn't a case of the weak or a will they won't they, but the actual permanent, irreversible transformation of one man? That's the idea. The meth is just what he happens to be good at. So he wrote the pilot, and then he went out to sell it, and it did not go well. Showtime passed. They already had Weeds, which is about a suburban mom selling cannabis, and they thought it was too close. And here's a detail I find quietly hilarious. Gilligan has since said that if he'd actually known Weeds existed, he probably wouldn't have written Breaking Bad at all. He'd have assumed the ground was taken. He got the show made partly through not watching enough television. HBO passed. They weren't keen on a meth dealer, which given some of what HBO has aired is a fun sentence to sit with. TNT passed, and then FX passed. In 2005, FX actually took it and started developing it. So for a while, this was going to be an FX show. Meanwhile, over at AMC, they were in a strange position. AMC at that point was a network that showed old films. That's what the letters stand for, American Movie Classics. And they had just decided to get into original programming, and they had Mad Men, and they wanted something to sit next to Mad Men, so Gilligan's agent got him in a room. And Gilligan, by his own account, was barely trying. He'd been round the houses with this thing by now. One of the AMC executives has said that Vince wasn't taking them very seriously, that he pitched it and didn't seem to care much what happened. He said his line about a man going from milquetoast to Scarface, and everyone nodded, and he left. And he thought, that was a perfectly pleasant meeting. They said they liked the script. Lovely, it's never going to happen. They bought it. AMC went and acquired the rights off FX, which apparently wasn't straightforward. And then they greenlit the pilot and partnered with Sony to produce it. And then the genuinely mad decision, they let him direct it. Vince Gilligan had directed, at that point, maybe 2 episodes of The X-Files. That's it. That's the entire directing resume of the man they handed a pilot to. The line producer has told this story. Her agent rang and said, the script's by our client Vince Gilligan, and he's directing it as well. And she said, great, what else has he directed? And there was a long pause. Gilligan's own line about it is that he feels like he robbed a bank. To this day, he says, he can't imagine why AMC and Sony let him do it, but God bless them for it. Part of the answer is that they hired John Toll to shoot it, who is an Oscar-winning cinematographer, and the thinking at AMC was reportedly along the lines of, if Toll's holding the camera, it's going to look fabulous regardless. One of the executives described the whole thing as something only a group as naive as they were would have allowed. I love that so much. The best directed pilot of the century, made because nobody was paying enough attention to stop it. Then casting, which nearly went a completely different way. Gilligan wanted Bryan Cranston, AMC did not, and honestly, I understand why. In 2006, if you knew Bryan Cranston, you knew him as Hal from Malcolm in the Middle, the dad. The goofy, lovable, trousers round his ankles dad. That is not a man you look at and think, there's my terminal cancer patient turning into a drug lord. So the network went out to other people. They approached John Cusack, they approached Matthew Broderick, both of them said no. Sit with that for a moment because it is one of the great near misses in television. Ferris Bueller nearly played Heisenberg. There's a whole timeline out there where that's the show, and I have no idea what it looks like. Gilligan's argument for Cranston was a single X-Files episode called Drive, which he'd written, and in which Cranston played a deeply unpleasant man, an anti-Semite, dying, who takes Mulder hostage. And the thing Cranston did in that episode was hold two things at once. You loathed him and you felt for him simultaneously, and neither canceled the other out. Gilligan's read was that Walter White needed exactly that trick, and that Cranston was the only person he'd seen do it. He said he has no idea how the man does it. For what it's worth, Gilligan has also pushed back on the mythology here. The story has grown over the years into this tale of him valiantly standing his ground against the network. His version is much less romantic. He says he didn't have to fight that hard. It was more a matter of educating people about what Bryan could do. Cranston, to his credit, has been generous about it too. He said he doesn't blame Sony or AMC at all. It's a huge leap, going from Hal to Walt. So they made it, and then it launched, and the launch was a catastrophe. AMC put it on the 20th of January 2008, and that date was deliberate. Both conference championship games were on that night, and the plan was to catch the adult male audience the second the football finished. Clever on paper. The NFC game went to overtime. It ran straight through the time slot. The show that had survived 4 networks saying no, a writer's strike, and a casting fight it didn't quite have, got knocked over by a field goal. The season 1 finale pulled 1.5 million viewers, which for a cable drama is not a good number. And then the other thing, which is the strike. The Writers Guild of America went on strike in November 2007, right in the middle of production, and season 1 got cut from 9 episodes down to 7. Gilligan has since called that a blessing in disguise, and I think he means it. The forced stop gave them room to look at what they'd built, and what they realized was that Walt's arc was moving too fast. They were burning him down too quickly. The hiatus let them slow the whole thing down and stretch the transformation out across years instead of months, which is the single most important structural decision in the series. The show is a monument to constraint. Every part of it that went wrong made it better, which is a deeply annoying thing to be true, and I say that as someone who has never once been improved by a setback. 5 seasons, 62 episodes. The 20th of January 2008 to the 29th of September 2013. Shot in a city they picked for tax reasons, directed initially by a man with no directing credits, starring a comedy dad 2 other actors turned down, launched into a football match. I don't know. Sometimes the accidents just line up. Now, let's talk a bit about the place, because this is the detail that most people don't know, and it delights me every time I think about it. Breaking Bad was not written about Albuquerque. The original script was set in Riverside in California. That was the plan. Southern California, inland, hot, ordinary. That's where Walter White lived on the page. New Mexico had film tax incentives. They were good ones. And Sony, being a studio, did the sums and moved the production to Albuquerque because that's what the sums said. Now, the normal thing to do at that point, the thing almost every production does, is shoot in the cheap place and pretend it's the expensive place. You film in Vancouver and call it Seattle. You film in Atlanta and call it anywhere. Nobody's checking. Gilligan could have shot Albuquerque and put up a sign that said Riverside and got on with it. He didn't. He rewrote the show to be about the place he was actually standing in. And I think that's one of the 2 or 3 most consequential decisions in the entire series. And it was made by an accountant, not on purpose, obviously. But somewhere there's a spreadsheet that changed television. Because here's the thing about that landscape. It's morally blank. It's not scary in the way a forest is scary. It's not oppressive in the way a city is oppressive. It's just enormous and indifferent and beige, and it does not care what you do on it. You can drive 20 minutes out of Albuquerque and be somewhere that nobody is ever going to look at, which is a fairly convenient property if you're cooking drugs, but it's more useful than that. It's a place where a man can decide who he is without anyone watching. That's the whole show. Gilligan has been open about his reference point for the look, and it's Sergio Leone. Westerns. The spaghetti westerns specifically, all those enormous skies and those faces held for far too long. And once you've heard that, you can't unhear it, because Breaking Bad is a western. It's not a crime drama that happens to be in the desert. The RV is a covered wagon. The desert is the frontier. The frontier is the place the law hasn't reached yet, which is exactly what Walter White is looking for. And the show ends the way westerns end, which is a man walking back into a place he should have stayed away from. The other thing about Leone, and I don't think this gets said enough, is that he's the reason the show is patient. Leone will hold on a face while nothing happens for 1.5 minutes. Breaking Bad does that constantly. It's a show that is not remotely afraid of silence, and I think it learned that from watching cowboys stare at each other. Michael Slovis came on as cinematographer from season 2, and he got 4 Emmy nominations for it. He and Gilligan wanted to shoot the show in CinemaScope, the proper wide anamorphic format, and Sony and AMC said no. So that's another one for the pile. The 2 of them didn't get the thing they wanted and made something extraordinary within the shape they were given. What they did get was film. The show was shot on 35mm, and the reasons given are wonderfully unglamorous. The equipment is robust, and the format let them shoot economically. That's it. No poetry about the texture of celluloid. It was practical. And the happy accident, years later, is that shooting on film is why the whole thing transferred to 4K and looks better now than it did when it aired. Everything shot on the digital cameras of 2008 looks like 2008. Breaking Bad looks like it was shot last month. And since we're on the topic of how it looks, there's a thing about Albuquerque itself that does a lot of the work and never gets credited, which is the light. The city sits at about 1 mile above sea level, and it gets somewhere north of 300 days of sunshine a year. Thin air, high altitude, very little moisture in it. What that means practically is that the light is hard. It doesn't scatter and soften the way it does in a wetter place. Shadows have edges. You get these skies that go a blue you don't quite believe, and clouds that sit on top of them looking like they've been cut out and stuck on. For a production, that's 2 things at once. It's a gift because everything looks enormous for free. And it's a discipline because hard light is unforgiving. It shows you every line on a face, every bead of sweat, every bad decision written into someone's expression. You can't hide a performance in that light. It's the visual equivalent of the show's whole attitude, and they didn't design it. It was just there in the sky above the tax incentive. The other thing worth mentioning is what the show left behind industrially. Breaking Bad didn't just use Albuquerque, it more or less proved Albuquerque. Better Call Saul shot there for 6 more years. And in 2018, Netflix bought ABQ Studios outright and turned it into a production hub. A television show about a chemistry teacher became the reason a city has a film economy. I don't think anyone involved would have predicted that from the pilot. Now the colors. I want to be a bit careful here because this is the area where fan analysis has gone a little feral over the years. There is a real, deliberate color system in the show. The wardrobe department, led by costume designers Kathleen DeToro and Jennifer Bryan, worked with character colors, and it's not subtle once you're looking. Marie is purple all the time, in a way that stops being a quirk and starts being a warning. Skylar's in blues. Walt drifts. He starts in this ocean of beige and green, these apologetic nothing colors, and by the end, he's in black. Jesse's palette gets progressively more washed out and grubby as the life takes bits out of him. That's real. That was done on purpose. Where I gently step off the bus is the further reaches of it, where every single garment in every single scene is supposedly encoding a precise emotional state. And if you cross-reference the shirts, you can predict the plot. I've read some of those breakdowns. Some of them are genuinely brilliant. Some of them are people finding faces in clouds. And honestly, both are a good use of an evening, so I'm not going to be sniffy about it. Fun fact on the money side, by the end of the 5th season, episodes were costing upwards of $6 million each, which for a cable show at the time was a serious number, and it's part of why the final season looks the way it does. But talking about the city, the bit I find genuinely strange and quite moving is what happened to Albuquerque afterwards. Because the show ended and the show did not leave. There are now statues. Actual bronze statues of Walter White and Jesse Pinkman in a real city, of 2 fictional men who manufactured methamphetamine. And you'd think that's an easy thing to be cheerful about, but it wasn't, and I think the argument around it is worth sitting with for a second. Because some people in Albuquerque were not delighted. The show is set during a real drug epidemic in a real place, and their city became internationally famous as the Meth City. That's a real cost, borne by real people who didn't get a vote on it. Gilligan's response to the statues was interesting. He didn't get defensive. He said in all seriousness that no doubt some folks were going to say just what our city needed. And he gets that. He sees it. And then he said what he sees is 2 of the finest actors America has ever produced, in character, as larger-than-life tragic figures, cautionary tales. The mayor, Tim Keller, defended them from a different angle, and I think his argument is the honest one. He pointed out that while the stories might be fictional, the jobs are real, every single day. The production brought money and work and a film industry to New Mexico that outlasted the show. And he said something I keep thinking about, that the city is also a character, and we see ourselves in so many ways, good and bad. That's a more grown-up way to hold it than most cities manage. And then there's the tourism, which is its own small comedy. There are RV tours. You can go on a bus and be driven around the locations by someone doing a bit. The Los Pollos Hermanos building is a real restaurant called Twister's, and people queue up outside it to take photographs of a fried chicken shop that has never sold a single piece of the fried chicken it's famous for. And then there's the house. The White family house is a real house in a real neighborhood, owned by a real family who have lived in it since long before any of this happened. And people turn up, constantly. They stand outside and take photographs of a stranger's home. And some of them throw pizzas on the roof. I need you to understand that this is a genuine, ongoing problem that required an actual intervention. Because of one scene, Walt, furious, hurling a takeaway pizza onto his own roof in a moment of pure impotent rage, people decided that the correct tribute was to buy a pizza, drive to a private residence, and throw food at it. The family had to put up a fence. Gilligan has publicly and very wearily asked people to stop. He did an interview where he essentially said, "It's not funny. There's nobody in that house who consented to this. Please just don't." They kept doing it. There's something about that story that I think is accidentally the most Breaking Bad thing in the world. A man makes a piece of art about consequences landing on people who never asked for them, and the consequence of the art is a stranger's roof covered in pizza. Anyway, that's the city, picked by accountants, written into the show by a man who couldn't bring himself to lie about where he was standing, and now permanently, slightly begrudgingly famous for it. Here's the fact I always start with when I'm trying to explain this character to someone who hasn't seen it. Walter White worked on research that contributed to a Nobel Prize. Not adjacent to it, not near it. His name is on the crystallography that fed into it. This man, at some point in the early 90s, was genuinely one of the more promising chemists in the country. And when we meet him, he is explaining ionic bonds to teenagers who are not listening, and then working a second job at a car wash, where his own students turn up and photograph him drying their wheels. That's it. That's the engine. Everything else is detail. Because the thing people get wrong about Walter White, and I include myself on the first watch, is the assumption that the cancer starts it. It's such a clean read. Man gets terminal diagnosis, man does desperate thing, man cannot come back from desperate thing. Tidy, tragic, wrong, the cancer doesn't start anything. It removes the reason not to. Everything that Walt becomes was already in the house. The pride was in the house. The resentment was in the house, quietly rotting in a cupboard for 20 years. What the diagnosis does is take away the future. And once you take away a man's future, you take away every argument for behaving yourself. He isn't transformed by the cancer, he's permitted by it. Which brings us to gray matter, and this is where the show does the smartest bit of withholding in the whole series. Walt co-founded a company, Gray Matter Technologies, with Elliot Schwartz, and with Gretchen, who at the time was his partner in the other sense as well. 3 of them, a garage, and a genuinely good idea. The name itself is a joke about the 2 of them. Schwartz means black, white means white. Put them together and you get gray. It's the kind of naming a couple of clever young scientists would find funny at 2 a.m. And Walt left. He sold his share of the company for $5,000. Gray matter is now worth billions, and he watches it. He watches Elliot on television. He knows to the dollar on any given week what the thing he built is worth now because he checks. Now, why did he leave? The show does not tell you. And I want to be really clear that this is not an oversight, and it's not a mystery being saved for a reveal that never came. It's the point. What you get instead is shards, and they don't fit together cleanly. There's the version where Gretchen's family were wealthy, and Walt met them and felt small, and the class humiliation of it curdled something. There's the version where he simply panicked, walked out of his own life for reasons he couldn't articulate at 26, and has spent 30 years constructing a story where it wasn't his fault. There's the version where they pushed him out. There's Gretchen's version, which is that he left her and she has no idea why, and she's furious about it in a way that's been sitting in her for decades. And here's my honest position on it, for what it's worth. I don't think the show can tell you, because I don't think Walt can. He's revised that memory so many times that the original is gone. It's been overwritten. When he says he was cheated, he believes it. That's the horrible part. He isn't lying to Gretchen at that restaurant table. He's reciting the only version he's got left. I find that more frightening than any of the bodies. The idea that a man can edit his own foundational wound so thoroughly that even he can't get at what actually happened. That's not villainy. That's just being a person, taken slightly too far. And here's a fun detail that always fascinated me because it's so on the nose that it should be terrible and somehow isn't. Heisenberg. Werner Heisenberg was a German theoretical physicist, and the thing he's famous for is the uncertainty principle. The rough version, you cannot simultaneously know a particle's position and its momentum with perfect precision. The more precisely you pin down where it is, the less you can know about where it's going. Observe it, and you change it. So Walter White, chemistry teacher, picks a criminal name that means, you cannot know both what I am and where I'm heading. It's absolutely shameless. It's the sort of thing that would get flagged in a first-year creative writing seminar. And it works completely, and I've thought about why for years, and I think the answer is that it works because it's the name Walt would actually choose. It's a physics joke. It's a joke for an audience of one, made by a man who is desperate to be the cleverest person in a room he's just walked into wearing a stupid hat. The name isn't the writers being clever. It's the character being clever badly in a way that reveals him. Nobody in that world gets the joke. That's the tragedy of it. Now, the lie. I'm doing this for my family. He says it for 5 seasons. He says it to Skylar. He says it to Jesse. He says it to Hank. He says it to himself in the car. It is the load-bearing beam of the entire man. And the show spends 5 years quietly taking it apart. It gives him chance after chance to be telling the truth. And he fails everyone. He is offered the money. Elliot and Gretchen offer to pay for his treatment, no strings, and he turns it down. And he turns it down not because of pride in some noble sense, but because accepting it would mean admitting that the story he tells about gray matter is wrong. He'd rather cook drugs than be wrong. He makes more money than his family could ever spend, and he does not stop. He has enough. He passed enough somewhere around the middle of season 2, and he did not notice because the money was never the thing. And then, at the very end, he says it out loud. I did it for me, I liked it, I was good at it, and I was alive. Gilligan has talked about this being the line the whole show was walking towards. 5 seasons, 60-odd hours of television to get a man to admit one sentence in a kitchen. And what I love about it is that it isn't a twist. Nobody in the audience is surprised. We've known for years. The only person in the world who didn't know was Walt. And the finale isn't him confessing to Skylar. It's him confessing to himself in front of a witness because he can't do it alone. Cranston's contribution to this man is enormous, and it's mostly physical. The members-only jacket was his. That specific, sad, slightly too small jacket, that's an actor making a decision about a man. The mustache was his idea, and it's a masterpiece of a mustache. It's not a mustache that says anything. It's a mustache a man grew in 1994 and simply never revisited. Cranston has said he thought of it as an impotent mustache, which is exactly right and also a sentence I enjoy typing. He put on weight for it, 10 pounds or so, deliberately soft, because Walt has the body of a man who stopped paying attention to his body a long time ago. And the walk, that slightly stooped, apologetic shuffle in the early seasons, the way he seems to be trying to take up less space in every room. Watch him in the pilot and then watch him in season 5. The physical man is completely different, and almost none of that is the writing. That's an actor doing arithmetic on a body. The comparison I keep landing on is this. We all know someone who peaked in a room they left. Someone who was, at 24, in the middle of something, and then for reasons they can't fully explain, they walked away, and they've been quietly furious ever since. And mostly that furiousness comes out as being a bit off about other people's success. A tightness around the mouth when someone else gets promoted. Walter White is that man with a terminal diagnosis and a chemistry degree. That's all. He's not exceptional. His resentment is the most ordinary thing in the world. The show's argument is that the only unusual thing about him is opportunity. Cranston has spoken about the scene that stayed with him, and it's not the one people expect. It's Jane. Walt is in the room. Jesse is unconscious. Jane rolls onto her back and starts to choke, and Walt moves towards her. Instinct, decency, whatever's left of the man, and then he stops. And he stands there. And he watches her die, and he does nothing, and the camera stays on his face while he does nothing. Cranston has said filming that disturbed him, that he had to go somewhere to do it, and that it stayed with him afterwards in a way film work usually doesn't. And I think that's the actual midpoint of the character, not the big set pieces, not the explosions. A man standing still in a bedroom, choosing not to move his hands. Because everything before that has an argument attached. Everything before that, Walt can explain. He can tell you it was self-defense, or it was them, or us, or he had no choice. This one has no argument. He wasn't threatened, he wasn't cornered. He simply did the arithmetic and worked out that his life was easier with her dead, and then he let it happen, and then he went home. The show is very quiet about it. There's no music sting, nobody says anything. He just goes home and gets in bed. And this is a thing that I don't think I've ever fully recovered from, the show doesn't let it stop there. Jane's father is an air traffic controller. He goes back to work too early because he can't sit in his house, and he makes a mistake, and 2 aeroplanes collide over Albuquerque. 167 people. Because a man stood still in a bedroom for 90 seconds. I'll come back to the plane properly later on because I've got things to say about it, and I'm still not certain they're the right things. For now, I want to end this bit somewhere else. The crawl space. Season 4. Walt has discovered the money is gone, and he's down in the dirt under his own house, and he starts laughing. And it's not a laugh, it's the sound a person makes when the pressure finds a hole. Skylar is standing above him, framed in the hatch, looking down at her husband lying in a hole in the ground, cackling. And the camera pulls up, slowly straight up until the hatch is a rectangle of light, and the man is a small thing at the bottom of it, still laughing. Grave-shaped, it's a grave-shaped hole in the ground with a man laughing in it, no notes. I don't have anything to add to that. 2 more things about him, and then I'll leave the man alone. The hat. The pork pie hat is a costume, and I mean that in the most literal sense available. It's not a disguise, nobody's fooled, it hides nothing, you can see his entire face. It's a costume in the theatrical sense. It's what he puts on to be someone. And what kills me about it is how badly it works at first. Watch him early on in that hat. He looks ridiculous. He looks like a supply teacher at a fancy dress party. There's an enormous gap between the man and the outfit, and you can see him inside it, willing himself into it. And then somewhere around the 4th season, the gap closes. And it's not that he grows into the hat, it's that there's less of him left to not fit. Cranston has talked about the shaving of the head as the actual beginning, and I think he's right. The hair goes, and it's ostensibly about chemotherapy, and it's actually a man discovering that he looks frightening and quite liking it. There's a shot of him in the bathroom afterwards, just looking at himself, and it's not grief, he's assessing. And then the other thing, which is the most quoted line in the show, and the one I think people get backwards, I am the one who knocks. Skylar is frightened, and she says she's frightened for him, that someone might come to the door. And he goes off. He does the whole speech. A man dies in Belgium every day. Do you know how much I make a year? No, you clearly don't know who you're talking to. I am not in danger, Skylar. I am the danger. And then I am the one who knocks. Now everyone treats that as the great villain moment. It's on posters. It's a ringtone. Men have it on t-shirts, and it's a lie. It's the biggest lie in the whole show. And it's a lie he's telling to a woman who has just expressed concern for his safety. Because at that exact point in the story, he is not the one who knocks. He's a man being kept alive by other people's tolerance. Gus is the one who knocks. Mike is the one who knocks. He's got about 4 weeks left before he's begging in a crawl space. It's a tantrum. It's a man whose wife has just implied he might not be able to look after himself, and rather than say, I'm scared, which is the truth, he delivers a monologue about being death itself. It's the same instinct as slamming a door. And the audience loved it so much they put it on merchandise, which is, when you think about it, the exact same mistake Walt is making. He performs enormous power to hide the fact that he's frightened, and 1 million people go, yes, brilliant, that's the bit. Jesse Pinkman was going to be killed at the end of the 1st season. That was the plan. That was written down and agreed and generally understood by everyone in the room. The rough shape of it was a drug deal going badly wrong, and Jesse dying in it, and Walt watching that happen and being changed by it. Jesse was a device. He was the first serious thing Walt would lose, and the loss was the point of him. And then Bryan Cranston and Aaron Paul got in a room together and started doing scenes, and it became completely impossible. Gilligan has told this story a number of times, and he's never dressed it up. He said, essentially, that it became clear very quickly that killing Jesse would be a colossal mistake because the thing happening between those two actors was better than anything on the page. There was a chemistry there, and I'm sorry about that word in this context, but there isn't another one that nobody had planned for, so they didn't do it. And the show became a two-hander permanently, and it's unrecognizable otherwise. The strike helped here, as it kept helping. We talked about that already, the shortened first season, the enforced pause. All I'll add is that the timing meant the decision came late enough to still be reversible. Another few episodes, and Jesse's in the ground, and there's no show. That's the largest thing the writer's room ever changed its mind about, and it happened because two men were good at pretending in front of each other. Aaron Paul was 28 and largely unknown. He'd done bits. He'd been in things. He auditioned for this and got it, and then spent 5 years building one of the most complete character performances I've ever watched. And here's what I think he actually did technically, because it's easy to miss under all the yo. Jesse's vocabulary is small. That's a deliberate choice, and it's brutal on an actor. He does not have the words. He never gets a monologue that lays him out. He's got maybe 200 usable words, and about half of them are the same word. And he has to convey grief, love, guilt, terror, and moral clarity using that. So Paul does it with everything else. He does it with his shoulders, mostly. Watch Jesse's shoulders across the run. They start up around his ears in this permanent adolescent shrug, a boy performing not caring. And by the end, they're just down, collapsed. There's nothing holding them up. And yo stops being a word and starts being punctuation. It's a comma. It's a full stop. It's a small verbal handrail he grabs at the end of a sentence when the sentence has gone somewhere he didn't intend. Now Jesse as the conscience of the show, and the sheer cruelty of that job, because that's what he is. He's the only person in the main cast with an intact moral instinct. Not a good man particularly. He deals drugs, he does genuinely appalling things. But he has a thing Walt has surgically removed from himself, which is the ability to be troubled by what he's done at a moment when being troubled is deeply inconvenient. And so the show puts him under all of it. Every awful thing Walt does eventually lands on Jesse because Walt won't hold it. There's a scene in season 2 where Jesse's in a support group and he says the thing about how he's been made to feel like a bad person, and he says he isn't. He's just, and he can't finish it. The kid can't finish a sentence about himself in a room designed for finishing sentences about yourself. That's the character. But now, let's talk a little about Jane, because I've been putting it off and I have some things I'm not sure about. Jane Margolis is Jesse's neighbor, and then his landlady, and then the love of his life. And she's in recovery, and then she isn't. And what happens between them is the closest thing to happiness Jesse gets in the entire series. They lie on the floor and look at the ceiling. They talk about Georgia O'Keeffe. It's a genuine, adult, tender thing, and it exists for about 4 episodes. We've covered what Walt does in that bedroom. I'm not going back through it. What I want to talk about instead is the aftermath, and specifically the aeroplanes. Jane's father, Donald, is an air traffic controller. That fact is planted early and quietly, and I did not clock it. And I'd be surprised if you did. After Jane dies, Donald goes back to work far too soon because sitting in the house is unbearable, and he makes a mistake. And Wayfarer 515 collides with another aircraft over Albuquerque. 167 people. and debris comes down over the White House, and Walt stands in his garden and looks up, and a pink teddy bear falls into his swimming pool with one eye burned out. Right. My honest opinion, which I've held and unheld about 6 times. It's the boldest swing the show ever took, and it's the one I'm least certain about, because the case for it is strong. The show has spent a season arguing that consequences are real and that they travel, and the plane is that argument made enormous. It says you cannot do a private evil. There is no such thing. The line from Walt's inaction to those airplanes is long and preposterous and completely traceable. And the point is that it's traceable. The universe is not indifferent. It's just slow. And the cold opens leading up to it are extraordinary. Those black and white teasers with the pink object in the pool spread across the whole season and nobody knowing what they mean. That's structural nerve of a kind almost nobody attempts. And the case against is also strong, and I can't shake it. It's a metaphor that got out of the lab. It's so large and so obviously symbolic that it briefly stops being a thing that happened in the world and becomes a thing the writers did. For one episode, the show's hand is visible, and in a series this disciplined about causality, where the rule is that nothing happens because the plot needs it, you can feel the plot needing it. Gilligan himself has been fairly candid that the reception was mixed and that he understands why. There's a version of this show without the plane that loses something real. There's also a version with it that's slightly embarrassed about itself. I go back and forth. I think on balance I'm for it, mostly because I admire the nerve. But I'd never argue with someone who wasn't. And here's a fun detail from the production side that I think is genuinely one of the great pieces of foreshadowing because it's absolutely intentional. It's an acronym. The episode titles in season 2, 737 down over ABQ. 737 down over ABQ. 4 episodes spread across a whole season, spelling out the ending in plain sight. I did not notice. Someone told me years later, and I felt genuinely thick about it. Since we're on the subject of things that land on Jesse, we should talk about Brock. Because the ricin is the moment where I think the show fully commits to what Walt is, poisoning a child. Not killing him, that's important, and it's very deliberate. Walt uses lily of the valley, which is a common garden plant, and he doses it precisely enough to make a 6-year-old dangerously ill without killing him. Because he needs Jesse to believe that Gus did it. It's calculated to the milligram. That's not a man in a rage. That's a man doing sums about how sick a child needs to be. And then the reveal. There's no confession, no dialogue, no music. The camera just pans across Walt's back garden and settles on a plant in a pot by the pool. And the label says, Lily of the Valley, 4 seconds. No words. It reframes an entire season. That's the show at its absolute best, and it's why I get a bit tetchy about the plane, because that's the same argument made with a whisper instead of a shout. And then there's Todd. Jesse Plemons walks into the last stretch of this show and plays a young man who is unfailingly polite, quietly helpful, respectful to his elders, punctual, and completely structurally empty inside. Todd is more frightening than anyone else in the series, and I've thought a lot about why. It's because everyone else has an engine. Walt has pride, Gus has grief, the Salamancas have honor of a horrible kind, Todd has nothing. He does the appalling thing and then asks if you want a coffee, with no gap between the two because there's no gap in him. The child on the bike, he shoots a kid off a dirt bike in the desert because the kid saw them, and then he apologizes for the inconvenience, and you realize there is nothing at all behind his eyes, and there never was. And then the cage, which is the bleakest thing Breaking Bad ever put on screen. Jesse is chained in a hole, cooking, and he's brought up on a lead like a dog. And Todd's affection for him is what makes it unbearable. Todd likes him. That's the horror. Todd genuinely enjoys their working relationship while keeping a man in a pit. Which brings us to where Jesse ends up, the gate and the car and the sound he makes driving out of there. That scream that isn't triumph or relief, but something much rawer. And then Alaska, eventually. But I'm going to leave that alone for now because there's a whole film about it and I'd rather give it proper room later on. Now, since we're on Jesse, I want to talk about his lot because the show's treatment of them is more careful than it looks. Badger and Skinny Pete are jokes. That's their function. They're comic relief. They're stoned. They say ridiculous things. Badger has a Star Trek pitch about a pie-eating contest that goes on for 4 minutes and is one of the funniest things in the series. And then the show does something quietly decent with them, which is that it never has them betray him. Not once. Every clever, competent, powerful person in Jesse's life uses him. Walt uses him constantly. Gus uses him. Todd uses him. And the two idiots who can barely function are loyal to him. Absolutely, right to the end. They're the ones who help him in the film at real risk for nothing. The show's morality is much simpler than people give it credit for. It's not about intelligence at all. It never was. Walt is the cleverest man in every room he enters, and he's the worst person in it. Skinny Pete cannot organize a bus journey, and he'd take a beating for a friend. And then Combo, who dies on a street corner selling for them, shot by a child on a bike, and Jesse can't get past it, and Walt genuinely cannot understand why he's still going on about it. And that gets us to the support group, and I want to do this scene because it's the best writing Aaron Paul ever got. Jesse goes to a group. He's not there for the right reasons. He's there because it's a place with chairs and coffee and people who have to be nice to him. And eventually he talks. And he tells them about a dog he had to put down. Except it isn't a dog, it's Combo transposed because he cannot say the real thing out loud in a room. And the group leader does the thing group leaders do, which is that gentle, professional, entirely well-meant thing where he says, "We're not here to judge. Nobody here is judging you." And Jesse detonates because he says, "So I can do anything at all, and it's fine, no judgment?" And the leader says something about self-acceptance, and Jesse says, "Then what's the point? What's the point of anything if there's no judgment?" And then he says the thing. He says, "You know what? I did do it. I killed a dog. And it wasn't a dog. And you're all going to sit there and accept me." And he walks out, and the show does not resolve it. That's the whole character in 90 seconds. He is the only person in this universe who actively wants to be judged. He's begging for it. He wants someone to tell him he's done a monstrous thing, because if nobody tells him, then it wasn't monstrous. And if it wasn't monstrous, then nothing is. And he can't live in a world like that. Walt would give anything to escape judgment. Jesse is going door to door asking for it. And then there's Mr. White, which I've saved because it's such a small thing, and it's not small at all. He almost never stops calling him that. 5 seasons. Through the money and the murders and the years, through being partners, through being enemies, this grown man calls him Mr. White. Because Walt was his teacher. That's the relationship. It was set at 15 and it never moved. And every single time Jesse says it, he's re-establishing the hierarchy. I am the student, you are the teacher, you know things I don't, I have to do what you say. And Walt never corrects him, not once. In 5 seasons, that man never says, "Call me Walt." Because of course he doesn't. Why would he give that up? It's the only room he was ever the cleverest man in, and he's found a way to stay in it forever. Right? Skylar. In 2013, Anna Gunn wrote an opinion piece for the New York Times. It was called "I Have a Character Issue." And she wrote it because she had spent several years being hated by strangers for playing a woman on television. Not the character, her. There were forums where people discussed whether Anna Gunn deserved to be hurt. There were pages set up specifically about hating her. It got to a point where she was genuinely frightened, and she sat down and wrote about it publicly, and the piece is a very measured, very controlled bit of writing from someone who had every right to be furious. And her argument in it is the correct one, so I'll just say it plainly and then get out of the way. Skylar White was hated for being the only person in the room behaving reasonably. That's it. That's the whole thing. She is a woman who discovers her husband is manufacturing methamphetamine, and she responds to that discovery by being upset about it. And a substantial portion of the audience decided this made her a nag, a shrew, a killjoy, a bitch. The whole cabinet of words we keep for women who won't get out of the way of a man's fun. She's an obstacle. That's the actual crime. She stands between the audience and the thing the audience wants to watch, which is Walt being brilliant and getting away with it. And so people hated her, and then they went and found the actress. Gilligan has been consistently publicly furious about this, which I respect. He's defended Gunn every time he's been asked, and he's expressed real bafflement at the vitriol. His line has essentially been that Skylar is a totally believable woman in an impossible situation, and that the hatred says something quite grim about the people doing the hating. And it does. It says the thing we all know it says, which is that a lot of people watched a show about a man's ego destroying everyone around him and came away thinking the problem was his wife. Anyway, that's the discourse. Let's talk about the character, because she's much more interesting than her reception. Skylar is a better criminal than Walt. I'll defend that. Not more ruthless, better. Because Walt's genius is chemistry and his crime is entirely improvised. He is constantly, frantically inventing solutions to problems he made 10 minutes ago. Skylar's genius is administration, and administration is what actually kills you. She's the one who understands money laundering. She's the one who works out that you cannot simply have a pile of cash, that money has to have a story, that a man who reports no income cannot buy a house. She finds the car wash. She works Bogdan. She invents the gambling addiction cover story, and she invents it in real time in front of Marie and Hank at a dinner table under pressure, and it is a beautiful piece of work. She constructs a whole fictional Walt, a man with a secret shame, and she does it so well that it explains everything, absorbs everyone's confusion, and makes them pity him instead of question him. That's a con. That's a proper con, executed cold by a bookkeeper. And then the storage unit. This is her thesis statement. Walt is going on about the money, and she takes him to a lockup and pulls up the shutter, and there's a mound of cash on the floor. Massive stacks of cash. Not a briefcase, a dune. A shapeless gray heap of money that has stopped being currency and become terrain. And he says, "How much is this?" And he doesn't know. And she says she can't count it. She gave up. She just stacked it and stopped, and now it's this. And then the actual line, which is one of the best in the show, "I want my kids back. I want my life back. Please tell me, how much is enough? How big does this pile have to be?" He has no answer. He never has an answer because the pile was never the point. And she's the only person who has properly worked that out and had the nerve to say it to his face while standing on it. Now Walt Jr., who I love. R.J. Mitta has cerebral palsy, and so does Walter White Jr., and the show cast an actor with the condition rather than having an able-bodied actor perform it. In 2008. That was not standard practice. It still isn't, entirely. And the show made almost no noise about it. It just did it. And more than that, the writing doesn't make his disability into a plot. It's not a lesson. Nobody learns anything from him, yes. He's just a teenager who has cerebral palsy and also has a favorite car and an embarrassing dad and a website he's mortified about. Mita has talked about this in interviews, and he's been generous about how much it mattered to him that the part was written as a person first. Fun detail, and it's become a whole thing in the fandom. The breakfast. Walt Jr. eats an enormous amount of breakfast. Across 5 seasons, this boy is constantly at a table with a plate in front of him. And at some point, the writers noticed the audience had noticed, and they leaned into it. There are counts online. People have made charts. And it's funny, and then it isn't. Because here's the thing about that running joke. Breakfast is the only ritual left in that house. It's the last functioning piece of family. Everything else has been dismantled. The lying, the money, the silence at dinner, the bedroom that isn't a bedroom anymore. But the boy still gets a plate in the morning and someone still makes it. And for about 4 minutes a day, they behave like a family that hasn't happened yet. The most heartbreaking version of it is in the last stretch, when Skylar's making it and nobody's talking and the food is just there, doing the job of a family that stopped working. And then the name. He asked to be called Flynn, he picks it himself, and he starts going by it as a way to have something that was his. And the timing of it, a boy quietly deciding to stop carrying his father's name around, is one of those things the show never underlines and never mentions again. Since we're on the subject of the household, let's talk about Marie. Betsy Brandt is criminally underrated in this show, and I will happily go to war about it. Marie is purple, as we've said, everything purple. And she's chirpy in a way that gets on people's nerves, and she's nosy, and she steals things. The kleptomania is the tell, and the show handles it beautifully by never explaining it. Marie shoplifts. She takes things she can easily afford from shops for no reason, and when she's caught, she constructs these elaborate, extremely detailed fictions about who she is. She tells strangers she's a pediatric surgeon. She's not. She's a radiologic technician who invents entire other lives at parties, for no gain whatsoever. And I think Marie is the closest thing the show has to a mirror for Walt that nobody talks about. She's a person with an enormous appetite for being someone more significant than she is, who tells lies for the pure pleasure of the lie, and who steals because taking things makes her feel real. She just doesn't have chemistry. If Marie Schrader could cook, that woman would be a warlord. And the chirpiness is armor. Watch her in the hospital scenes with Hank. The brightness is a job she's doing. Brandt plays it so that you can see the effort in the corners of it. This woman holding a tone in her mouth like a mouthful of water, because if she puts it down for a second, the whole thing goes. And then the marriage, which is the only functional one in the series. Hank and Marie genuinely love each other. They're the couple that works, which is exactly why the show does what it does to them, obviously. Which brings us finally to the phone call. Ozymandias. Walt rings the house and Skylar picks up, and the police are listening, and he knows the police are listening, and he does the speech, the most vicious speech in the entire series. He calls her a stupid bitch. He tells her she never believed in him, that she was never grateful, that he did everything, and he goes at her with everything he has, and he's crying while he does it, and it is genuinely hard to sit through, and he's doing it to save her. That's the thing. He knows the tape is running. He knows the only way Skylar is not going to prison for the rest of her life is if there's a recording of Walter White establishing on the record that she was a terrified woman under the control of a monster. So he becomes the monster on tape deliberately, and he burns down whatever is left of how she'll remember him, because that's the only thing he has left to give her. It's the closest he comes to a genuinely loving act in 5 seasons, and it is delivered as the cruelest thing he ever does. And what makes the scene is Anna Gunn's face, because she works it out. You can watch her work it out. There's a moment early in the call where she's just being destroyed, and then something goes across her face. She hears one word that's slightly off, or she clocks the room he must be in. And the horror on her turns into a completely different horror, and she starts helping him do it. He feeds her lines, she plays her part in the recording. 2 people building an alibi out of a divorce live with the police in the room. For what it's worth, Gilligan has said in interviews since that he likes to imagine things eventually got better for Skylar and Flynn, that he thinks about them, that in his head they're all right. I choose to believe him. I don't know that the show supports it, but he made them, so he gets to say. And then there's Ted, who I think is the most underrated bit of plotting in the show. Ted Beneke is Skylar's boss, and he's a good-looking, easy, slightly weak man who owns a business, and Skylar sleeps with him. And the show is very clear-eyed about why. She does it because she wants to hurt Walt, and because she can, and because for about 10 minutes she'd like to be a person who does things instead of a person things are done to. And she tells him, that's the bit. She doesn't hide it. She waits until they're in the kitchen and she says, plainly, I fucked Ted. And it's the only weapon she's ever had, and she uses it, and it works. But the reason I bring Ted up isn't the affair, it's the money. Because Ted is cooking his books, and Skylar, who cannot help herself, who is constitutionally incapable of watching someone do accounts badly, gets pulled into it, and then the IRS comes for him, and if Ted goes down, the audit comes to her door and from her door to Walt's. So she gives him a huge amount of money, hundreds of thousands laundered through a fictional dead aunt to pay his tax bill. And Ted, being an idiot, leases a Mercedes. And that's how you get one of the strangest scenes in the show, where Skylar asks Saul to help, and Saul sends Huel and Kubi round to lean on him. And they are not there to hurt him. They are explicitly there to make him write a check to the government. And Ted panics and runs and trips on a rug and breaks his neck and is left partially paralyzed. Sort of. He hits his head on a counter and ends up in a hospital bed in a halo brace, terrified, whispering that he'll never tell anyone. It's slapstick. A man is nearly killed by a rug in a farce sequence in this show, in the middle of a season about a drug war. And what it's actually doing is showing you what Skylar has become. Because she went to a lawyer who sent men, and now there's a broken man in a hospital, and none of that was the plan, and all of it was her decision. She's Walt now, small version, same machine. She just wanted to sort out a tax problem, and there's a bloke in a halo brace. Hank Schrader is a design problem that solved itself, and I don't think anyone involved planned a single bit of it. Look at what he is in the pilot. He's the loud brother-in-law. He's the man with a gun on his hip at a birthday party, doing a bit for an audience of teenagers, letting Walt Jr. hold his service weapon while Walt stands there in his beige jacket and says nothing. He's got the boom, the handshake, the terrible jokes, the homebrew, Schraderbräu. He brews his own beer, and he has a name for it, and he'll tell you about it. He exists initially as a contrast device. He's there so we can watch Walt be small. Every scene Hank is in during that first season is measuring something. Here's a man who takes up space, and here's a man who doesn't, and they are related by marriage. He is comic relief with a badge. And then he becomes the most psychologically honest character in the show, and I genuinely don't think that was the plan. I think Dean Norris was just too good, and the writers followed him. The turn is El Paso. Hank gets a promotion he's desperate for, down to the border, and he's swaggering about it. And then he walks into an actual cartel situation, and there is a tortoise on the ground in the desert with a severed head strapped to his back. And the head is a man he was meant to be meeting, and someone has written a message on the shell, and then it explodes. That's the moment, that's where the show stops using him as a punchline, because everyone standing around that tortoise gets torn apart, and Hank survives, and then Hank has to live in a body that watched that happen. And what the show does next is, I think, its single most humane piece of writing. He gets panic attacks, not PTSD in the television sense, no flashbacks, no screaming, no dramatic sweaty nightmare sequences. He gets in a lift, the doors close, and he can't breathe. And he pulls over on the way to work and sits in the car with his hands on the wheel, shaking. And then he fixes his face and goes in and does the boom and the handshake and the terrible jokes. Because he cannot name it. That's the crucial part. Hank Schrader does not have the vocabulary to say, I am unwell. He's a DEA agent in his 40s from a culture that has no filing system for this. So the thing comes out sideways as rage, as being an arse to his wife, as a new obsession with beer, as anything at all except the sentence, something happened to me and I'm not right. And he's the only character in the show with visible, untreated damage that he cannot lie about. Walt lies constantly and beautifully. Skylar manages. Marie invents. Hank just stops breathing in a lift and has no idea why. Then, 1 minute. I'll say up front, This is the best directed sequence in the series, and it's about 4 minutes long, and I'd put it against anything in film. Hank is in a car park, not a set piece location, a supermarket car park, ordinary daylight, tarmac, and he gets a phone call from an unknown number, and a voice says, "You have 1 minute." And then the cousins are there. What makes it extraordinary is how quiet it is. There's no score for most of it. It's just concrete and sun and 2 men in suits walking. And the sound design is all boots and shell casings and the specific noise a car door makes when a bullet goes through it. And Hank is not a hero here. He's terrified. He's fumbling, he gets shot and he crawls and he's making the noises a real person makes. And then he wins, and the way he wins is horrific and desperate and involves reversing a car over a man. And there is nothing triumphant about it at all. He sits there afterwards, empty, having survived something he should not have survived. And it cost him his legs for a season. Then the minerals. He's in bed, unable to walk, humiliated, and Marie gives him a box of rocks. "They're minerals, Marie." It's a joke. It's a great joke, and the whole internet has run it into the ground. But the rock hounding is the most tender thing in the entire series, and I don't think that's an exaggeration. Because look at what it actually is. Here is a broken man who cannot use his body and cannot use his mind on the thing his mind was for. And someone hands him a small, slow, harmless hobby. Rocks. Categorizing rocks. And he takes to it with this enormous focus, and it's the only time in the show where you see Hank Schrader at peace. It's a man given permission to be gentle about something. It's completely without irony. And it works because he's so aggressive about it. No, they're minerals, that he can enjoy it without admitting he's enjoying it, which is the only way he's ever been able to enjoy anything. And then, of course, the toilet. I need to just appreciate this structurally for a second. The hinge of the entire series, 5 seasons, the whole engine of the plot turns on a man reading on the loo. Hank is at Walt's house. He goes to the bathroom. There's a book on the cistern. He picks it up because he's bored, the way you do. And it's Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman, and there's an inscription in the front from Gail Bodeker. And the inscription says something about his other favorite WW. And the show holds on Dean Norris's face while a man's entire life rearranges itself. And it does it in about 6 seconds, and then the pupils. His pupils dilate. That's a real thing that happens, and Norris does it, or the camera catches it, and either way, it's one of the great close-ups. And the joke is that Hank has spent the show being told over and over that he's not clever. He's the bull, the blunt one, the one who bumbles about while Walt does the thinking. And he solves it. He solves the whole thing sitting on a toilet because he read a book that was left out. And then the garage. You're the smartest guy I ever met, and you're too stupid to see he made up his mind 10 minutes ago. That's not the garage, that's later, but let's do the garage first, because the garage is where he hits him. Hank confronts Walt, and Walt does what Walt does, which is start negotiating. He starts constructing. He offers a version of events. And Hank looks at him and says the thing that lands hardest, which is essentially, "I don't know who you are. I have never met you. The man I know would never," and Walt gives him the speech about the cancer, about being dead in 6 months, about tread lightly. Tread lightly? 2 words, and it's the moment the mask comes fully off in front of family, and Hank's face does this thing where the brother-in-law and the DEA agent are both present, and neither of them knows what to do. And then the desert. To do it. Hank has won. That's what people forget. Hank has actually won. Walt is in cuffs, in the desert, beaten, and Hank has done it. And he takes out his phone and he rings Marie and he says, "It's over, I got him." And then the Nazis arrive. And this is where I want to make my actual argument about the character, because the show does something extraordinary and almost nobody notices what a risk it is. Hank doesn't get a speech. He's on the ground and he knows exactly what's about to happen, and Walt is screaming and begging and offering $80 million. And Hank says, "My name is ASAC Schrader and you can go fuck yourself." And then Jack shoots him mid-sentence. Not at the end of the sentence, during it. There's no swell of music, there's no slow motion, there's no last look. It's a gunshot in the middle of a word, and then he's on the ground and the scene keeps going. And that is the most honest thing this show ever did. Because in any other drama, that man gets a moment, he gets a line and a look and a breath. And Breaking Bad says, no, that's not how this works. That's not what death is. Death is a sentence you don't get to finish. And it's savage, and it's correct, and it's why that episode is what it is. Walt's reaction is the tell. He drops. He goes down onto his side in the dirt like something's been cut, and the camera does that awful lurching thing, and you realize that for all the lying, this bit was true. He didn't want this. He eventually wanted this. He wanted everything else, but he never wanted this, right? And now the production fact, which I've been saving because it will make you feel strange. Dean Norris asked to be killed off earlier. He had another job offer and the timing was awkward, and he went to Gilligan and essentially asked whether Hank could die a bit sooner so he could take it. Gilligan said no. Just no. And then went and wrote him the ending he wrote him. Imagine that timeline. Imagine the version of this show where Hank Schrader dies in season 4 for scheduling reasons. The whole final stretch collapses. There's no toilet, there's no garage, there's no desert. Sometimes the right answer is just no. And one last thing on Hank, which is the relationship nobody talks about. Hank is the father Walt Jr. actually has. Watch it. Just watch that thread across the show. Who takes the boy driving? Who gives him beer? Who does he ring? Who's he named after in the end? Because when that boy chooses a name for himself, he doesn't choose Walter, and he doesn't choose Hank either. But he chooses away from his father, and there's only one man in his life who's ever made him feel like he wasn't being managed. Walt loves his son enormously and cannot be in a room with him without correcting him. Hank just takes him places. And there's a scene late on, after the truth is out, when Walt Jr. is staying at their house, where Hank has to sit that boy down and tell him what his father is. And Dean Norris plays a man who has been waiting his whole life to be right about something and would now give absolutely anything to be wrong. That's the cost of the thing. Hank doesn't just lose the case. He dies before he can finish his case against Walt. He never wins it, and winning it would mean telling a teenager that his dad is a monster, and he would have to do it kindly, and he never does. Let's start with the bell. It's a little brass service bell, the sort you'd find on the counter of a hotel that hasn't been redecorated since 1974, and it's cable-tied to the arm of a wheelchair. And that is the entire vocabulary of one of the best characters on television, Ding. Mark Margolis plays Hector Salamanca, and he plays him after a stroke, which means no dialogue, no movement below the neck to speak of, and one finger on a bell. That's what he's got. That's the whole instrument. And he got an Emmy nomination for it, which is one of the more satisfying things the Television Academy has ever done, because what Margolis does with a bell and 2 eyes is genuinely one of the great pieces of screen acting. The rage in that man, he is completely immobile and radiating so much hatred that the room bends around him. He does contempt with his eyebrows. He does it faster than most people can do it with a monologue. And the bell is the joke, right? Because it's a summoning bell. It's the noise you make when you want service. It's a little brass rectangle that says, "Fetch me." And this man, who has been reduced to nothing, uses it to command a room. Every single ding is an act of aggression. Fun fact, and it's a strange one. Margolis played Hector across both series, which meant that he spent about 15 years aging backwards through the role. He plays him in Breaking Bad in the chair. Then Better Call Saul comes along, and he has to go back and play the same man a decade younger, walking, talking, running an organization, and then the show goes forward and puts him back in the chair. Which means at some point, Mark Margolis had to act his way into a stroke he'd already played the aftermath of years earlier. That's one of the stranger assignments in television, and he did it without a note out of place. Now, since we're here, let's talk about Tuco, because Tuco is the reason for a great deal of what follows. Raymond Cruz plays Tuco Salamanca in the second season, and what he brings to the show is something it desperately needed at that point, which is genuine unpredictability. Up until then, the show has been tense, but it's been tense in a controlled way. Walt is in trouble, but the trouble has rules. Tuco has no rules. Tuco beats a man to death in front of his colleagues over nothing. Over a word, over a tone of voice. He's high, he's paranoid, he's affectionate one second and murderous the next. And the show becomes properly frightening for the first time because you cannot predict the man in the room. And here's the thing I find genuinely interesting. Raymond Cruz has talked about how exhausting the part was. It's a performance pitched at maximum constantly, and sustaining it was punishing. And the character was written out, partly for story reasons, partly because that level was not sustainable. So they needed a new antagonist, and they built one who was the exact opposite in every respect. Gus Fring exists because Tuco left. The best villain in the show, arguably the best villain in television, is a replacement part. He was created in the writer's room as the answer to a scheduling and performance problem. Tuco was chaos, so the room went, right, what if the next one is control? What if he never raises his voice? What if he's polite? That's how you get a man in a fried chicken uniform, out of a logistics problem. I love that. Nothing in the show is designed, it's all repair work. Right, the cousins, Leonel and Marco Salamanca, twins, suits, boots with silver skull toe caps. And between them, across an entire season, they speak maybe a dozen words. They are the most stylized creation in the show and the closest it ever gets to horror film grammar. They don't behave like people, they behave like weather. They arrive and things stop. The introduction is one of the great cold opens. They're crawling. Two grown men in immaculate suits on their bellies in the dust, crawling up a dirt road towards a shrine to Santa Muerte, past a whole crowd of ordinary pilgrims who are also crawling. And they place an offering. It's a drawing, a child's drawing of Heisenberg. There's no dialogue, there's no explanation. There's just a devotional ritual being performed by two men who are going to kill someone, and the show does not tell you who they are for another episode. And then the flashback with the axe, which explains everything about that family in 90 seconds. Two little boys. One of them says he wishes the other one was dead, the way children do, meaninglessly in a strop. And Uncle Hector calmly picks the child up and holds his head under the water in a barrel until he stops moving. And then lets him up, and the boys are hysterical, and Hector says, "Family is all. That's the education. That's what those men are." They were assembled, and the axe just sits there in the background of the shot, on the wall, doing nothing at all, and then 20 years later, one of them puts it in a supermarket display and waits. Since we're talking about the family, we should do Don Eladio and the shape of the thing above them. Don Eladio Fuente runs the Juarez cartel, and the show's version of it is genuinely feudal. It's not an organization, it's a court. There's a man with a pool, and there are men who come to the pool, and everything is about proximity and humiliation. Eladio doesn't manage, he receives. Juan Bolsa is the administrator, the one who does the actual work of running the thing, and he's got that put-upon middle management energy that makes him weirdly the most relatable person in the cartel. And the operating principle, this is the bit that makes it all make sense, is that Eladio deliberately keeps his people at each other's throats. He encourages the rivalry between his distributors. He thinks it's healthy. He thinks it stops any one of them getting big enough to be a problem for him. It's a management strategy. It's the same management strategy you'd find in a mid-sized insurance firm. He's just doing it with murderers, and it works right up until it doesn't, which is the general rule with that sort of thing. Now, Lalo. And this is where I get properly enthusiastic, so bear with me. Lalo Salamanca is played by Tony Dalton, and he is a character invented for Better Call Saul. He does not exist in Breaking Bad. He was not planned. He was seeded. Nobody wrote him down in 2010. Except there's a line, Season 2 of Breaking Bad. Walt and Jesse have kidnapped Saul Goodman and driven him into the desert and they've got him in a hole in the ground with a gun to his head. And Saul, absolutely terrified, blurts out, "Lalo didn't send you? No Lalo?" And then he never mentions it again. Nobody mentions it again. It's a throwaway. It's a bit of frightened babble written to sound like a lawyer with a colorful past. And I'd bet good money that at the time it meant precisely nothing. And then, a decade later, Better Call Saul went back and found it. They took one meaningless word out of a panicking man's mouth and built a 6-season antagonist out of it. And not a small one. Lalo is the most alive person in that entire universe. He's charming, he's genuinely funny, he's warm to people, he doesn't cook, and he is completely lethal. And the switch between the two doesn't exist, because there's no switch, because it's all the same man. And what it does to Breaking Bad retroactively is remarkable. That scene in the hole isn't a joke anymore. When you rewatch it now, knowing what you know, Saul is not babbling. Saul is having the worst flashback of his life. That terror is real, and it is specific, and it has a name. That's the most audacious thing I've ever seen a prequel do. It's not a retcon because nothing was changed. They just found a load-bearing wall inside a sentence nobody remembered. And I think there's something instructive in that about how these people work. They don't plan the universe. They go back through the rubble looking for something that already fits. Right? The last thing I want to say about the Salamancas, and it's the thing I think the show is actually doing with them, they are what Walter White claims to be. Think about it. What is the Salamanca creed? Family. That's it. That's the whole thing. Family is all. Everything they do, every horrific act is justified by blood. Hector never drowns a child to teach him that family is all. The cousins crawl through dirt for family. Hector rings a bell rather than talk to the DEA and refuses to give up a single name out of loyalty to family, and that's the one moment where you almost admire him. They're absolutely sincere about it. Everything for family, no other justification offered or required. And they are a nightmare. They are an atrocity. That code produces a barrel with a boy in it. So when Walt sits at a table and says, "I'm doing this for my family," the show has already shown you exactly where that sentence goes when someone actually means it. The Salamancas aren't the counterexample to Walt. They're the control group. And Walt isn't even doing that. He hasn't got their excuse. He's just a man who liked it. And I can't leave Hector without doing the interrogation because it's the scene where I stop hating him for about 4 minutes. The DEA have got him. He's in a wheelchair, post-stroke, and they've brought him in, and they've got a translator and a bell and a woman patiently going through the alphabet so he can spell out an answer. And Hank is standing there absolutely certain this is going nowhere, and it isn't. And everybody in the room knows it isn't. And Hector spells something out. Letter by letter, ding by ding, taking his time, the whole room leaning in. And it's obscene. It's an insult. He's used a formal DEA interview and a translator and a federal agent's afternoon to slowly, methodically spell out an insult. And then he sits there. And then he defecates, deliberately. Sitting in front of them in a federal building, he defecates in his wheelchair and stares at Hank while he does it. And you know what? Good for him. I don't like the man. He nearly drowned a child in a barrel to make a point. But there is something magnificent about a person with no body left and no voice left and nothing at all to bargain with, refusing to give the state a single syllable, and using the only fluid he has as a weapon. Family is all. He genuinely means it. He goes to his grave meaning it, and the grave is a nursing home with a bomb in it. That's the thing about the Salamancas. They're the only people in this entire story who never once lie about what they are. The most important thing about Gustavo Fring is the thing the show refuses to tell you, and I want to start there rather than with the biography because the absence is the character. Vince Gilligan has said, more or less directly, that he left Gus's origins ambiguous on purpose. And the comparison he reached for is the briefcase in Pulp Fiction, the glowing thing in the case that you never see, that has no answer, that is deliberately structurally empty, because whatever is in that case, it is less interesting than the possibility of it. That's Gus's past. It's a briefcase, and I want to say plainly how rare that discipline is now because it's basically extinct. The modern instinct is to fill everything in. Every mystery becomes a prequel, every gap becomes an origin story. Every unexplained thing gets explained until it's furniture. And Breaking Bad had a character whose entire menace lives in a hole in his history, and then Better Call Saul spent 6 seasons with that man and still didn't fill the hole in. They got right up to the edge of it, and then they didn't. That's remarkable restraint from an industry that cannot leave anything alone. So, what do we actually know? He's Chilean. Everyone calls him that, the Chilean, El Chileno. He grew up poor. He's mentioned that himself. He had at least 2 older brothers. And there's the tree. When Gus was a boy, around 7, the story goes, he cultivated a lucuma tree. And this wasn't a hobby, it was food. It was how he fed himself and helped feed his family, a poor child growing fruit out of the ground because that's what there was. And a coati got into it. A coati is a sort of long-nosed raccoonish thing, a nuisance animal. And it ransacked the tree and ate the fruit. So Gus trapped it. And he caught it, and it was wounded in the trap, and he did not kill it. He kept it alive, deliberately, to prolong the suffering. He tells the story himself decades later, completely calmly, and he mentions, with something that isn't quite pride, that it lived for quite some time. That is a 7-year-old. That's not a man who became something. That's the finished article at 7 years old, and everything afterwards is just scale. I think about that story more than almost anything else in this show, because it means Gus wasn't broken by the pool. The pool didn't make him, the pool just gave him a project. Then Santiago. He moves to the capital at some point, and this is where the fog gets properly thick. In Better Call Saul, it's said that in Santiago, he and Peter Schuler, a German businessman, escaped from something. We're never told what. All we get in Better Call Saul is Gus, decades later, using it to calm Schuler down during a crisis, reminding him that they've had their backs to the wall before in Santiago and they got out. That's it. That's all you get. 2 men and a wall and a thing that happened. And Lalo separately references some mysterious incident in Santiago involving Gus in Better Call Saul, also unspecified. And Hector, in a flashback, sneers at him and calls him Big Generalissimo. Now, the Pinochet of it all. I want to be careful because this is where fan theory does a lot of heavy lifting that the show does not authorize. The implication is there. It's absolutely there. Pinochet's regime ran Chile from the mid-70s until 1990. Gus leaves Chile in the mid-80s. Generalissimo is a military rank. And there's a whole reading where Gus was somebody in that apparatus. Intelligence, possibly, something with reach. The show never confirms a syllable of it. And I think the reason is that the specific answer would be smaller than the question. If Gus was a colonel, he's a colonel. If he was an informant, he's an informant. Whatever he was, it's a job title, and job titles aren't frightening. What's frightening is a man with no verifiable past at all. Which brings us to Hermanos, Season 4, Episode 8, which is the single best episode about this character. Hank has Gus's fingerprints. They were found at Gail Boettischer's flat. And Hank, being Hank, he won't leave it alone, and he starts digging into who this fried chicken philanthropist actually is. And he finds nothing, not a little, nothing. There is no record of a Gustavo Fring existing in Chile. No birth record, no school, no address, no employment, no tax, no anything. The man does not appear in the documentation of his own country. Gus's explanation, delivered to Hank's face in a DEA office with perfect politeness, is that the Pinochet government's record-keeping was poor and a great deal was destroyed. Which is true, actually. That's a real thing. It's a completely plausible answer, and he delivers it while helping himself to a chair. And then the show does the thing that settles it. Because in a flashback at the pool, Don Eladio is standing over him and he says, The reason Gus is still breathing is that he knows who Gus is, not who he says he is. Who he is, so the name is a lie, almost certainly. Gustavo Fring is a costume that a man put on somewhere between Santiago and Mexico City, and the show tells you that in a single line from a man in swimming trunks and then never returns to it. Now, Maximino Arquinega. And this is the wound. Gus found him in Santiago, in poverty, the slums, by the show's account, and Gus paid for his education, paid for a chemistry degree at the University of Santiago. And Max was brilliant, genuinely extraordinarily gifted, advanced degrees, biochemistry, chemical engineering, and the two of them built Los Polos Hermanos together. That's the joke, and it's not a joke, it's a memorial. The Chicken Brothers, there were two of them. That's why it's plural. Every one of those restaurants, every sign, every uniform, every bucket is a monument to a man who is dead and nobody knows it. And Gus stands in one of them every day wiping tables under his own dead lover's name. They were lovers. The show implies it constantly and never quite says it. Hector's taunts, Lalo calling Max his boyfriend, the whole texture of it. Gilligan said publicly in 2020 that he personally thinks Max was more than a friend, that they were probably lovers. And Peter Gould later confirmed it outright, and then the pool. They go to Don Eladio to pitch him. They want the cartel to distribute meth instead of cocaine. And to get the meeting at all, Gus has been giving away Max's product to Eladio's men without permission, which is an enormous insult, and he knows it. And they turn up with a chicken bucket, and the meth is hidden under the lid. And Eladio hears them out and then has Hector shoot Max in the back of the head on the patio, while Juan Bolsa holds Gus down. And the show makes Gus watch the blood go into the water. That's the image. Not the shot, not the body, the blood dripping into a swimming pool, spreading. And Gus on the floor being held. And then Eladio tells him he's only alive because of who he is. And then everyone goes back to their drinks. Everything after that is a 20-year revenge structure disguised as a fried chicken franchise. Every single thing. The laundry, the super lab, the DEA donations, the hospital board, the politeness, the 15 years of standing behind a counter being unremarkable. All of it is a man building a machine to get back to that pool. And the detail that makes me put my head in my hands in a good way is the scholarship. Gus endowed a chemistry scholarship at the University of New Mexico, in Max's name. The Max Arquinega Chemistry Scholarship. It's real within the show, and it's paid for the education of maybe 3 dozen students over the years. One of them was Gail Bodeker. So Gus built a memorial to a brilliant, gentle chemist he loved. And the memorial produced another brilliant, gentle chemist. And he found him, and he was clearly, visibly fond of him. Watch them together. Gus is warm with Gail in a way he is with nobody else alive. He's got him back, he's got a version of it back, and then Walter White had him shot in the face. That's why Gus does what he does with the box cutter. That's the whole reason. It's not policy, it's grief, wearing a very good suit. And on Hector, I've said what the Coati means, so I'll just note that keeping Hector alive is the same act at scale. He doesn't let him die, he funds his care. He makes sure the man survives in a chair with a bell. Then salud, and the tequila, and the 20 years arriving all at once. He walks up to that same pool and he brings a bottle. And he drinks first so they'll drink, and he poisons himself to do it. And then he goes and kneels by the water and makes himself sick and gets up and watches them all die around him. And then he looks at the pool, and then face off. The bomb, the wheelchair, the bell, and the shot everybody has seen, Gus walking out of the room, adjusting his tie with half his head gone. Honest opinion, it's slightly too much. I think it's one of the very few moments where the show reaches for an image because it's a great image. And I think a plainer death would have been more frightening, and I love it anyway, completely, because he adjusts the tie. That's the bit. Half a man, and the last thing he does on earth is straighten his clothes. And here's the thing I'll leave you with about Giancarlo Esposito, who does all of this with almost nothing. He never raises his voice. He barely moves. There's a whole essay to be written about his stillness, the way he stands with his hands folded, the way he waits an extra beat before answering. The most terrifying thing that man does in 5 seasons is fold a shirt. He's in the back of the restaurant, tidying, and Walt has just done something appalling, and Gus doesn't shout. He picks up a piece of clothing and folds it neatly, taking his time. That's it. That's the whole performance. One more thing, because it's my favorite bit of Gus's operation, and it's not the chicken, the super lab. Think about what that actually is for a second. It's an industrial-grade, state-of-the-art chemical laboratory with air filtration and power and drainage and a lift, built underneath a working industrial laundry in a city without a single permit, without a single subcontractor talking, without one person noticing. That's not a drug operation. That's a construction project. That's civil engineering. And the prequel eventually shows you the price of it, and the price is Werner Ziegler. Werner is the German engineer Gus brings in to build the thing, and he's lovely. That's the problem. He's warm and funny, and he loves his wife, and he loves his work, and he's the sort of man who will explain a load-bearing calculation to you with genuine delight, because he thinks you'll find it interesting too. And he gets homesick. That's all he does. He's been underground for months, and he misses his wife, so he slips away for a weekend to see her. And Gus kills him, not in a rage. Mike drives him out into the desert and lets him talk about the stars and then shoots him in the back of the head because Werner made a mistake, and mistakes cannot be tolerated in a structure this precise, and because a man who wanders off once will wander off again. And that's the actual man, not the box cutter. The box cutter is theater. It's a performance staged for an audience of 2, designed to make a point. Werner is what Gus is like when nobody's watching, quiet, regretful, and absolutely immovable. He built a laboratory under a laundry, and the foundations of it are a man who wanted to see his wife. Fixer isn't a real job. It's a thing that exists in films. It's a word we use because the actual arrangement is too boring to say out loud. That when serious criminal enterprises need a problem to go away, what they need is not a hard man, it's a competent one. Someone who has done this before and knows the order of operations. Mike Ehrmantraut makes it look like an actual profession, and that's the whole trick of the character. Jonathan Banks has a face that does nothing. I mean that as praise of the highest order. Everybody else in this show is emoting. Cranston's doing an aria. Paul's got his whole body involved in hours, and Banks just stands there with a face like a closed shop, and somehow he's the most interesting person in the room. And what Mike is, in terms of what he brings to the show, is procedure. He's method. He's a checklist made of a man. Watch him work. The plastic sheeting goes down first. The order's always the same. When he arrives at a scene where an amateur has done something, the first thing he does is look at the room and sigh, because the room is now a series of tasks. And none of them are difficult, but all of them are necessary, and nobody else has bothered to learn them. He's the tradesman. Everyone else in this world is an artist, and Mike came to do a job. Which brings us to half measures, which is the most quoted thing he ever says and the most misunderstood. The speech is about a beat cop in Philadelphia. Mike is called out repeatedly to a house where a man is beating his wife, and Mike knows the man will kill her eventually, and one night he takes him out to the desert and puts a gun to his head and lets him go with a warning. A half measure, and the man went home and beat her to death. And so Mike's conclusion is, no more half measures. It's a fantastic speech, delivered brilliantly, and it's the closest thing this character has to a philosophy. And it's a lie he tells himself. That's the bit that took me years to see. It's a story a man constructed to justify a life of full measures, of killing people because killing people is tidier. And Better Call Saul spends 6 seasons quietly demonstrating that Mike Ehrmantraut takes half measures constantly, all the time. He takes them with Nacho, he takes them with Jimmy, he takes them with himself every single day for 9 years. He is a man whose entire operating principle is a rationalization, and the prequel loves him enough to show you that without ever pointing at it. And then The Rain, Mike's Philadelphia backstory, comes to us retroactively, and it's the best acting in either series. And it's a man sitting in a car. He was a police officer, his son Matty was a police officer, and the department was corrupt. Everybody was on the take, and Matty was the one who wouldn't be. And Mike knew what happens to a cop who won't be, so he went to his son and told him to take the money. He told him. Because that's how you survive, and he wanted his boy to survive. And Matty took the money, and they killed him anyway. And so Mike went and got the men who did it, and then he went and got very drunk and rang his daughter-in-law from a phone box in the rain. And Banks does this entire thing sitting still in one register with a face that isn't doing anything. And he says the line, "I broke my boy," and it's not even loud. That's the whole man. Everything else about Mike Ehrmantraut is a man walking around the outside of that phone box. And then Kaylee, his granddaughter, that's the reduction. All of it, the 15 years, the parking booth, the sniper rifles, the bodies, the getting up early, comes down to a bank account with a child's name on it. He's not building an empire. He's building a number, and when the number is big enough, he stops, except he doesn't get to stop. Nobody in this world gets to stop, and he's the one who knew that from the start, which is why he's the only person who's never surprised, right? Let's talk about Saul Goodman, and I want to come at him sideways through a production fact rather than a theme because the fact is so good. Saul Goodman was written for 4 episodes. 4. He was a bit part in season 2, a sleazy strip mall lawyer with the adverts and the Constitution on the wall, in for a handful of scenes. To solve a plot problem, Walt and Jesse need legal cover. Here's a man who does that. Off you go. And Bob Odenkirk was so good that he became a series regular, and then he got a better show than the show he came from. I don't think that's controversial anymore, but I want to say it clearly. The 4-episode guest part from season 2 ended up carrying the best written show in the franchise. That's an insane sentence. That doesn't happen. The name is a pun. It's a pun. Saul Goodman. That's it. That's the joke. And the character explains it himself with the pride of a man who thinks he's done something clever. And here's what I love, and it's a slightly perverse thing to love. Gilligan and Peter Gould wrote a character whose entire personality is a pun, and then years later they gave him a tragedy. They took a walking gag and made him the saddest person in the universe. The origin of the spin-off is quite lovely, actually. The conversation started at the end of Breaking Bad, Odenkirk, Gilligan, and Gould kicking it around, mostly because they didn't want to stop working with each other. And they landed on a prequel. Who was this man 6 years earlier? AMC and Sony ordered it on the 11th of September 2013. Breaking Bad's finale aired on the 29th. They ordered the spin-off 18 days before the show they were spinning off had finished airing. That's confidence, or possibly nerves, and I genuinely can't tell which. And what it becomes is this. Jimmy McGill and Saul Goodman are 2 different men wearing one body, and the show is about the moment the second one wins. Jimmy is a decent person. That's the horrible bit. He's a con artist and a chancer, and he cuts every corner there is. But the man wants to be good, and more than that, he wants his brother to say he's good. Chuck. Michael McKean doing something so precise and so cruel that I struggle to rewatch it. Chuck McGill is a brilliant lawyer with a psychosomatic illness who has spent his entire life quietly, elegantly, lovingly holding his little brother's head underwater. And he's never wrong, factually. That's the trick. Everything Chuck says about Jimmy is true, and it's said in order to destroy him. You're not a real lawyer. The tape, the whole apparatus of a clever man using the truth as a weapon against someone who loves him, and Kim Wexler. Right, this is the bit where I get slightly evangelical, so I apologize in advance. Kim Wexler does not exist in Breaking Bad. Not a mention, not a photograph, not a line. She is entirely invented for the prequel, which means from minute one, everybody watching knew she was doomed, because she's not there later and Saul is alone. And she's the best character in the entire universe. I'll say it. Better than Walt, better than Gus. Rhea Seehorn plays a woman who is competent in a way television rarely bothers with, and the show's real subject, not the plot, the actual subject, is that Kim Wexler likes the con. She likes it. She's not corrupted by Jimmy. She's not dragged. She's a brilliant, disciplined, hardworking lawyer who discovers that the most alive she has ever felt is running a scam in a bar, and she goes looking for it. And she is the one who pushes. And that's an infinitely more interesting story than a good woman being ruined by a bad man. And it took nerve to write. And almost nobody noticed how radical it was. What all of this does to Breaking Bad backwards is a thing I want to end on. You cannot rewatch Saul's introduction the same way. It's not possible. When he turns up in that suit doing the bit, you now know that this is a man using an alias, that the volume is a bereavement, that the loud, terrible adverts are what's left after something specific was taken out of him. There's a scene in Breaking Bad, the one where he tells Walt about the man he wanted to be, or the bits where his mask slips for half a second, and it plays completely differently now. Everything in Breaking Bad changed, not a frame of it was altered. But the lore flows backwards, and the man in the strip mall is now a ghost, and he was always a ghost, and we just hadn't been told yet. Right, 2 more before we move on, because I can't do this section without them. Nacho Varga. Michael Mando plays a man who is trying to get his dad out of a burning building for 6 seasons, and that's the whole character. Nacho is competent. He's the most competent person in the Salamanca organization by an enormous margin, and that's precisely the problem, because being good at that job means you can never leave it. He gets promoted deeper. Every success is another year. And all he wants is for his father, an honest man with an upholstery shop who wants nothing to do with any of it, to be safe. That's it. That's the whole ambition. And the way that story ends is one of the hardest things in either series. Nacho, cornered with no options at all, standing in front of the cartel, and he takes the only thing he's got left, which is the ability to choose his own last speech. He tells them exactly what he thinks of them. He tells Hector to his face that he switched the pills. He hands himself the truth as a parting gift. And Mando plays it like a man setting something down. And then Howard Hamlin, which is the cruelest thing Better Call Saul ever did, and which I still haven't forgiven. Howard's crime is that he's smug. That's it. He's got the hair and the car and the suit and the confidence, and Jimmy has spent years hating him for it, and the audience has hated him alongside Jimmy quite happily. And then it turns out he's actually decent. He's been decent the whole time. He tried to help. He offered Jimmy a job. He's got a failing marriage and a therapist, and he's holding it together, and Jimmy and Kim destroy him for entertainment. They take his reputation apart for a scheme meticulously over months because it's fun. And then he walks into a flat at the wrong moment, and Lalo shoots him mid-sentence, and it's over. And he dies as a punchline in someone else's story. I've never got over it. The audience spent 6 years enjoying a man being ruined and then had to watch what it did to him, and that's a properly nasty piece of storytelling, and I mean nasty as praise. And then Gene, the black and white, because 5 seasons of Saul open with it. Omaha, a shopping center, a Cinnabon, a man with a mustache and glasses making cinnamon buns and being frightened of everything. That's what happens to Saul Goodman. He doesn't die. He gets a name that isn't his, and a job in a food court, in a small flat, and nothing at all, forever. And he sits in it, eating ice cream and watching his own old adverts on a videotape because it's the only proof that he ever existed. It's the bleakest ending anyone in this universe gets, and it's the only one where nobody's hurt. Donna Nelson is a professor of organic chemistry at the University of Oklahoma. In 2008, she read an interview with Vince Gilligan in which he mentioned in passing that he'd like to get the chemistry right and that they were doing their best, but they weren't chemists. So she wrote to him. Unprompted, a working academic, read a magazine and thought, well, I could help with that, and got in touch with a television production and offered. And she did it for free. She consulted on the show for years. She'd read scripts, she'd correct terminology, she'd draw the structures that went up on the whiteboard so that what was written there was real. If Walt is scribbling something during a lecture, there's a reasonable chance a professor in Oklahoma drew it first on a bit of paper and posted it to New Mexico. I find that lovely. It's such a specific, unglamorous kind of generosity. I have this knowledge. You seem to want it. Here you go. And the DEA consulted as well, which is its own strange arrangement. Agents advised on procedure, how a raid actually goes, what the paperwork looks like, what an office sounds like. And there was chemistry input from that side too, on the lab realism. So you've got a show about drug manufacture being advised by a chemistry professor and the Drug Enforcement Administration at the same time. And neither of them seems to have found this awkward. Now, the important bit. The chemistry in Breaking Bad is mostly accurate, with some details deliberately changed to avoid revealing real drug-making methods, not the terminology, not the glassware, not the general shape of the thing. But the actual process, the specifics, the sequence, the details that would matter, is fudged on purpose, and both Nelson and Gilligan have confirmed this publicly and repeatedly. Steps are missing, steps are wrong, things are left out that are not left out by accident. Gilligan's position on it has always been straightforward. He wanted the show to feel authentic, and he absolutely did not want to publish a recipe. So the rule was that it should be right enough to be convincing and wrong enough to be useless. And good, obviously good. That's the only defensible way to make this show. And the fact that they worked that out in 2008 and stuck to it for 5 years is to their enormous credit. Nelson has been quite clear that she wasn't going to help anybody make anything, and she didn't. Right? The blue. Because this is the question, isn't it? The blue meth. It's the logo. It's the poster. It's on the merchandise. They sell Blue Rock Sweets in Albuquerque, which is a whole other conversation. Chemically, it's nonsense. High-purity methamphetamine is clear or white. That's the actual answer. Purity does not produce color. If anything, it's the opposite. Because color in a product like that generally means contamination. A perfectly pure thing wouldn't necessarily look like glass. So the blue is a story decision. Full stop. It exists because the show needed a visual signature. It needed Walt's work to be identifiable on sight, so that a bag on a table in another state could tell you something without dialogue. And then, having made that decision, the show retro-justifies it. It hangs the color on the change of method, on the switch to a different route using methylamine, and the characters talk about it like it's a consequence rather than a brand. And here's what I think is the genuinely clever bit, which I don't think was intended and which I love anyway. It's branding. In a show about branding, Walt's product is blue for exactly the same reason a fizzy drink is a particular red. It's trade dress. It's a maker's mark. And the show is completely explicit that this is what it becomes. The blue is the thing that makes Heisenberg a name. The blue is what people ask for. The blue is what the competition tries to counterfeit badly and gets caught doing. Walter White's color is a marketing decision made by a man who insists he isn't in it for the ego. Now, since we're on it, let's do what the show actually gets right, because there's more than people think. The hydrofluoric acid is the big one, and it's the best taught chemistry lesson in the series, and it's delivered as a joke. Walt tells Jesse to use a specific plastic container. Jesse doesn't. Jesse uses the bath because it's there, and it's a bath. And what's a bath for? And the acid comes through the bath and the floor and lands in the hallway below along with everything that was in it. and that scene is essentially accurate in its principles. Hydrofluoric acid genuinely will not be contained by ceramic. It genuinely does horrible things to a great many materials while being perfectly happy in plastic. The reason Walt specifies the container is a real reason. So the show teaches you a genuine, useful bit of chemistry. This substance is not stopped by the things you assume stop substances, and it teaches it by having an idiot ignore the instruction and destroy a house. That's excellent teaching. That's better than most lectures. The mercury fulminate is the one people bring up, and the honest answer is that it's generous. Nelson herself has pointed out that the show's version is doing the character a considerable favor. Fulminate is real. It's a genuine primary explosive. And the idea that you'd carry a lump of it around in a bag and lob it at a floor is, let's say, optimistic about several things at once. Don't care. It's the best scene in season 1, and I wouldn't change a frame of it, because what that scene is actually about isn't chemistry. It's a man discovering that he can walk into a room full of people who could kill him and leave with money and his own dignity. The fulminate is a prop. It's a magic trick. It's Walt doing conjuring for a room of frightened men. The phosphine in the RV is similarly generous. Same defense. And here's a fun detail that I think about far more than I should. The meth on set was rock sweets. Blue rock candy. That's it. That's what all of it is. Every bag, every barrel, every enormous tray of product that these men are handling with such reverence, sugar. Bryan Cranston and Aaron Paul spent 5 years cooking, weighing, bagging, arguing over, and occasionally snorting sweets. There's something so perfect about that I can hardly stand it. The most feared substance in the American Southwest. The thing that gets people killed in 11 states, the blue crystal that a man ruined his family for, is a boiled sweet made by a props department in a van in Albuquerque. And it did become an actual product, incidentally. You can buy the sweets. There's a company in Albuquerque that makes them and sells them to tourists in little bags, and the fandom bought an enormous number of them. And I have no coherent opinion about that whatsoever. Right, the landing thought. And then we'll move on. The chemistry was never the subject. Gilligan has said this in various ways over the years, and I think it's the key to the whole thing. The show is about a man. Chemistry is just the language he happens to speak. If Walter White had been an accountant, this show is about fraud. If he'd been a surgeon, it's about something else again. The specific expertise is a costume. What the chemistry gives the show isn't plot, it's character. And it does it through one particular idea that runs the whole length of the series. And that Walt says out loud in the first episode, in a classroom, to teenagers who aren't listening. Chemistry is the study of change. Elements combine and change into compounds. That's all of life, isn't it? Solution, dissolution, growth, decay, transformation. It is fascinating. It is fascinating. He says that in the pilot. To a room of bored 16-year-olds, nobody's writing it down. And then he spends 5 years demonstrating it on himself, and by the end, he's the only person in the room who still hasn't worked out what he was teaching. That's the show. It borrowed a lab coat, but it was never about the lab. Now, since we're in the lab, let's talk about Gale, because I skipped past him earlier, and he deserves better. Gale Boetticher is a genuinely good man. That's the whole joke of him, and it's not a joke at all. He's a vegan, he does karaoke. He recites Whitman for pleasure. He makes coffee with a full siphon apparatus properly because he cares about it. And Walt drinks it and says it's the best coffee he's ever had. And Gale is delighted. He has a libertarian argument about why he does this. That adults should be free to make their own choices. That if it's going to exist, someone might as well make it properly and cleanly so nobody's poisoned by some idiot with a car battery. And he's wrong. Obviously, he's wrong, but he's sincere and he's kind, and he's the only person in that lab who is there because he loves chemistry rather than because chemistry is the last thing he has left. And the show kills him for it. And the reason it kills him is Walt's ego. Gale gets shot because he's good enough to replace Walt, and Walt cannot permit the existence of a person who could replace him. That's the entire motive. Jesse pulls the trigger and it's Walt's finger. And the way it's shot, Jesse crying, the gun shaking, the last frame of the season being a barrel pointed at the camera and Gale's face, is the single hardest cut to black in the series. And then, since we're on the industrial side of things, we should do Madrigal because it's the joke underneath the whole operation. Los Pollos Hermanos is owned by a German conglomerate, Madrigal Electromotive. And Madrigal doesn't just do chicken, they do industrial equipment. They do transport, they do warehousing, they do a bit of everything in the way that enormous conglomerates do, which means the entire American Southwest's methamphetamine supply is a line item in a German company's quarterly accounts. There's a spreadsheet somewhere in Hanover with all of this on it, in the wrong column, and nobody's looking. That's Lydia's job. Laura Fraser plays a corporate executive who is scared of absolutely everything, who orders the same tea in the same seat with her back to the door, who has a daughter and a nanny and a schedule, and who is casually willing to have 11 people murdered for tidiness. Lydia is the most modern villain in the show, and I think the most quietly damning, because she never gets her hands anywhere near it. She's logistics. She fills in a form and someone dies in another state, and she has an oat milk something and gets on with her day. The scene where she's introduced, the Madrigal executive being questioned, and the German boss going into a toilet with a defibrillator is the show telling you that the supply chain goes all the way up into a boardroom with a view. And then the train, I should say something about the train heist because it's the most fun the show ever has, and it's also completely mad. They rob a freight train of methylamine in the desert using a bulldozer, buried chemical tanks, and a pump. And the whole point is that they can't just steal it because a shortfall gets noticed. So they have to siphon it out and replace it with exactly the same weight of water, so the tanker still weighs what it should. It's a heist about inventory reconciliation. That's the tension. Two men in a desert with a hose doing arithmetic because an accountant somewhere will check the number, and it's thrilling. It's genuinely one of the best hours of the show. And then a child on a dirt bike rides past and waves, and Todd shoots him, and the show closes the door on you for the last time. There's an eye missing from a pink teddy bear. That's where I want to start, because it's the object that taught me what this show was doing. Not the crash, we've done the crash. The bear itself. A charred pink bear floating face down in a swimming pool with one eye burned out, filmed in black and white, in a teaser, at the start of an episode, with no context, in a season where nothing has happened yet that could possibly explain it. And they did that 4 times. 4 separate cold opens across an entire season, each one showing you a bit more of an event that hasn't happened, and no explanation, and no character, and no dialogue, and no music you'd call music. And people just watched it, and waited, for a year. That's the trust exercise. Breaking Bad trained an audience to sit quietly through 2 minutes of unexplained imagery without complaining, and that's a thing almost no show even attempts, because the received wisdom is that you have 90 seconds to grab someone or they're gone. Breaking Bad's teasers are their own art form, honestly. They function almost as short films. You've got the cousins crawling, you've got the fly sitting on something for ages, you've got a corridor, you've got a man's shoes, you got Walt's trousers flying off the back of the RV in the pilot and landing in the road and then sitting there in the dirt for 5 years until the very last stretch of the show drives past them again. And the flash forwards. The one that gets me is the 4th season opener where you're just watching a lab, cold, and it's Gale and he's excited and he's singing and you know, because you've seen the last shot of the previous season, exactly what's going to happen to that man. And the show makes you sit in a room with him while he's happy. Now the cameras, Gilligan does this thing where he lets inanimate objects have a point of view, and it shouldn't work, and it's one of the most distinctive things about the show. There's a shot from inside a barrel, there's one from under the floorboards. There's the shovel cam where a shovel is digging and you're on the shovel. There's the fridge. There's a shot from inside a cash machine. And most famously, there's the Roomba in the super lab, trundling about while 2 men argue above it. And these are not clever. That's what surprises me every time I go back. They should be unbearably showy, and they're not, because they're always doing a job. The barrel shot is about being trapped. The floorboard shot is about what's underneath a house. The shovel is about labor, about the actual physical work of the thing, which the show cares about enormously. It's a show that thinks objects are important, and it films them like they're characters. And the reason that lands is that in this story, objects are what kill you. A book on a cistern, a plant in a pot, a bell, a rice and cigarette, a phone in a car park. The people in this show are done in by things, then the montages, which are Kelly Dixon's. Dixon was one of the editors, and she cut the Cook montages, the time-lapse sequences that became a signature of the show. And what's interesting about them is that they're doing something quite sneaky. They're pleasure. That's what they are. They're 4 minutes of competence porn set to music, where two men do a difficult job well, and it's satisfying, and the show is inviting you to enjoy it. And you do enjoy it. That's the trap. The montage is the show letting you have the fun that Walt's having so that later it can ask you what you thought you were watching. Now, since we're on structure, let's talk about foreshadowing, because this show has a reputation for it that's slightly bigger than the reality and also entirely earned in the places that count. We've done the bear, we've done the lily of the valley, and the 4-episode acronym in season 2, which I'm still annoyed about. Here's another. Madrigal, a season 5 episode title. Take the first letters, FAMS. There's a whole run of them, 51, Madrigal, Say My Name, and so on. And if you take the initials of the episodes in the right order across the 5th season's first half, you do not get a hidden message about the ending. And the seasons are structured like that. It's not decoration. But here's my slightly heretical opinion on it. I don't think the foreshadowing is what makes the show good. It's a party trick, a brilliant one. The thing that actually makes it work is the rule underneath everything. Gilligan's rule for the writer's room, and he stated it many times, was that nothing is allowed to happen because the plot needs it to happen. Every single event in the story has to be caused by a person choosing something. That's it. That's the whole method. It sounds obvious, and it is completely, brutally difficult. And it's why they spent so long in that room agonizing. Because it means you can't ever have a coincidence save anybody. You can't have someone turn up at the right moment. You can't have a phone die conveniently. Every corner Walt gets out of, he has to get out of by being clever, and every corner he gets into, he has to walk into on purpose. And once you know the rule, you can see them obeying it under enormous strain. You can feel the room going, right, but how does he actually get out of the desert? And there's no answer for weeks. And then somebody says something and it's fine. Now, Fly, since we're on the subject of rooms, Season 3, Episode 10. Walt and Jesse are in the lab. There's a fly in the lab. That's the episode. That's the whole episode. 45 minutes of 2 men and an insect. And it exists because they were skint. That's the actual reason. It's a bottle episode. They were over budget on the season and needed a cheap hour, so they shot 2 actors in a set they already owned. And the entire thing cost almost nothing. And it's the most divisive episode in the show. People hate it. People find it self-indulgent and slow and pretentious. And it's the only episode in which Walter White nearly tells the truth. That's the thing. In that lab, at 4 a.m, exhausted, he gets right up to the edge of Jane. He starts talking about the night he was in a bar and he met a man and he didn't know who the man was. And he circles it, and he almost says it out loud to the one person who must never hear it. He doesn't. But he nearly does. And it's the closest that man ever comes to confessing to anybody but himself. And it happened because a television production ran out of money. Right? Music. Dave Porter's score is built out of texture rather than melody, and I think that's why you don't remember it and also why it works. There's barely a tune in the whole show. It's guitar scrape and drone and that dry, cracked desert sound. It doesn't tell you how to feel. It just makes the air in the room slightly wrong. And then the needle drops, which are ludicrously good. Crystal blue persuasion over a montage, which is such an obvious choice that it loops all the way back around to being perfect. And Baby Blue by Badfinger over the final shot. Guess I got what I deserved. which is either the cheapest joke in the series or the most devastating thing in it, and I've never decided. And then there's Negro Rio Azul, Season 2. The show hands an entire cold open over to a Mexican band, Los Cuates de Sinaloa, performing a narco corrido. It's a full music video, subtitled, in Spanish, about Heisenberg. And it's a genuine narco corrido, which is a real folk tradition, ballads about drug traffickers, sung as news, sung as gossip, sung as warning. So the show is using an authentic form of storytelling to do the thing that form actually does, which is spread a legend. And the lyrics tell you he's gonna die. They say it, right there in Season 2, in a song with a mariachi band in the first 2 minutes of an episode. The corrido announces that this man's fame is temporary and that the cartel is coming and that his story ends badly. Nobody clocked it. Because it was in Spanish and it had a Johnny accordion and everyone assumed it was a bit of fun. Right? The Room, Peter Gould, Jennifer Hutchison, George Mastras, Moira Wally-Beckett, Sam Catlin, Thomas Schnauz, who, remember, was not on the other end of the phone call about the RV in the first place. And Michelle McLaren directing what are, for my money, the best-looking hours of the series. That's a murderer's row. And the thing I want to note about Gilligan, genuinely, is that he has never once taken sole credit for any of it. Every interview, he's naming them. Every award, he's pointing at The Room. He's talked about how he had 6 or 7 of the smartest people he could find around him and how the network gave them lead time to think. And he said something about that period that stuck with me. He talked about how the general lack of confidence, the fact that nobody was sure this would work, made him strive to get every single detail right. And then he said, confidence is overrated because confidence makes you accept the first decent idea instead of throwing it away and finding the great one, which is either the most useful thing anyone's ever said about creative work or a man being modest about a masterpiece. Both, probably. And I want to say something about silence because it's the thing the show does that I've never seen anyone else pull off. Breaking Bad is comfortable with nothing happening. Not slow, that's a different thing, and slow is usually just badly paced. I mean, it's willing to stop. There are scenes where 2 people sit in a car and don't speak for 20 seconds. There are shots that hold on a face for so long after the line has landed that you start to feel slightly uncomfortable, like you've overstayed. And the reason it works is that the silence is always doing arithmetic. Someone in the frame is calculating. That's the show's real subject, people working things out. And working things out doesn't have dialogue. The great example is the two-hander in the lab, or the diner, or the car park. 2 men, a table, and about 4 minutes of nothing much, and it's unbearable. And the other thing, which is the opposite of silence, the sound design. Because when this show does use sound, it's brutal and specific. It's not music, it's a fly, it's a bell, it's the beep of a reversing lorry. It's a bicycle spoke ticking over in the desert. The show finds one small noise and makes you listen to it until you do anything to make it stop. The Fly is the whole method in miniature, an hour of television built out of a buzzing. And the last craft thing I want to mention, which is a tiny detail and I love it. The titles. The opening credits are about 15 seconds long. That's it. A green haze, a bit of smoke, some letters, and the cast names, and each name has 2 letters highlighted in the style of the periodic table. Bryan Cranston, bar Breaking Bad, Bia, bromine, barium. It's a nothing detail. It takes up no time. Most shows at that point were doing 90-second title sequences with a whole song and a montage. And Breaking Bad has 18 seconds and a chemistry joke, and then it starts. And that's the show's whole personality, honestly. Get on with it. Say it once quietly in the corner of the frame and trust that somebody's paying attention. I'm going to talk about the ending now, and I want to do it calmly because the ending is a finished object. It's been sitting there for 13 years. Nothing's going to happen to it. Ozymandias was directed by Ryan Johnson, and written by Moira Wally Beckett. And the title does the work before the episode starts, because it's the Shelley sonnet, the traveler from an antique land, and the two vast and trunkless legs of stone in the desert, and the shattered face half sunk in the sand with the sneer of cold command still on it. And the pedestal that says, "Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair," and there's nothing there. That's the poem. There's nothing beside it. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. AMC cut a trailer where Cranston reads the whole thing over footage of the New Mexico desert, in character, in that voice, and it's one of the great pieces of television marketing. So the title tells you the theme in advance. It doesn't ask you to work anything out. It just says, this is the bit where we find out there was never anything there. That episode is routinely called the best episode of television ever made. It's got a 10 out of 10 on IMDb, which essentially doesn't happen, and it's topped a great many aggregate lists over the years. I'm not going to argue with that. I'm also not going to rewatch it soon, because the structure of it is genuinely savage. It opens with a flashback to the pilot, Walt and Jesse in the desert, the RV, the trousers, Walt on the phone inventing his first lie to Skylar. And then the flashback fades, literally fades. The people vanish out of the frame and you're left looking at empty desert, and then the present arrives in the same spot and there's a gunfight going on. They dissolve the beginning of the show to reveal the end of it in the same place. That's the whole thesis in one edit. We've covered what happens to Hank there, and I've said what I want to say about it, so I'll leave it. What I'll add is the shape of the final three, because I think it's the cleanest thing about them. Ozymandias is the episode where he loses everything. Granite State is where he loses himself, and Felina is where he chooses one true thing. That's it. 3 hours, 3 movements, no fat. Granite State is my favorite, and I know that's a slightly unfashionable position, because it's the loneliest hour the show ever made. Walt is in a cabin in New Hampshire, in the snow, with a barrel of money and a stack of DVDs and no one. That's it. That's the episode. Robert Forster plays Ed, the disappearer, who is a vacuum cleaner repairman. That's his cover, and it's also his actual job. He genuinely fixes Hoovers. And the way that man plays it is so unbelievably restrained. He's not menacing, he's not warm. He's a professional providing a service at an agreed price, and the price for staying is $10,000 an hour. And Walt pays it because there is nobody else on earth who will sit in a room with him. That's the bit that finishes me. Walter White, at the end of everything, buys an hour of company from a man who fixes vacuum cleaners. He pays cash for a person to be in the room, and Forster does one of the best things in the series, which is nothing at all. He just plays cards. Robert Forster died on the same day El Camino was released. I'll leave that there. And there's the phone call to his son. Walt rings the school, gets Flynn on the line, and tries to send him money, and Flynn says no. And Walt says he's sorry, and Flynn is screaming at him, "Why are you still alive? Just die already." And Walt hangs up and stands in a bar and rings the DEA on himself and puts the phone on the counter and walks away. He gave up. That's the moment he actually gave up. And then the television comes on and it's Elliot and Gretchen, and they're on a chat show being gracious, and they say that Walter White contributed almost nothing to gray matter, that the man they knew is gone, and all that's really left of him is the name, and he stands up. And that's the thing about the ending. It's not redemption that gets him off that stool. It's not love. It's not his kids. It's pride. The oldest, dumbest, most Walter White thing in the world. 2 people said he didn't matter on television, and he walked out of a snowdrift and drove 2,000 miles to prove them wrong. Felina. Right, the title, because there are 3 readings and all 3 of them work, which I find slightly suspicious and also delightful. 1, it's an anagram of finale. Rearrange the letters, there it is. 2, it's chemistry, Fe, Li, Na, iron, lithium, sodium, blood, meth, and tears. 3, and this is the one Gilligan has actually pointed at. It's the Marty Robbins song. El Paso plays in the car Walt steals at the start of the episode, and it's on the tape deck, and the song is about a cowboy who falls for a girl named Felina and kills a man over her, and runs away to the Badlands and then can't stay away. And he comes back knowing full well he'll die for it, because the alternative is not seeing her again, and he does. He dies in Felina's arms. So the finale is named after a song about a man who returns to the place he shouldn't for the thing he loves and dies there. And the thing he loves isn't Skylar. That's the point. He goes back for the lab. Pick whichever reading you like. They're all load-bearing. Then the kitchen, the last conversation with Skylar. And I've already talked about what he says there and what it costs him, so I won't do it again, but the staging of it is worth a second because it's shot like a hostage negotiation. He's in the corner of the room, she's got her back against the counter, and he's not asking for anything. That's what's new. For 5 seasons, that man has walked into rooms wanting something and constructing a way to get it, and in this one he wants nothing, and so he can finally tell the truth. And then he asks to look at his daughter, not hold her, look at her. And he stands in a doorway and looks at a sleeping child for about 8 seconds and then leaves. And then he watches his son come home from school through a window from across the road, and that's the last time he sees him. That's the goodbye. 2 children seen from a distance, neither of them knowing he's there. Now, Gilligan on the ending, because he's been unusually candid about it. His stated intention was that Walt should get some measure of what he wanted and that it should cost him absolutely everything. And he's acknowledged without much defensiveness that a chunk of the audience finds the ending too kind. That Walt gets to win a bit, he fixes the money, he sorts Jesse out, he kills the Nazis, he dies in a lab with a smile on his face and a song playing. And Gilligan doesn't entirely disagree with that criticism. He said as much, which I think is a very healthy way for a man to hold his own work. He's also been open about the alternatives. They discussed endings where Walt lives. There were versions on the board, there always are, and there's a fair amount of documented anxiety in that room about sticking the landing because they knew what they were carrying by then. That's not a group of people who were confident. That's a group of people who were terrified. 10 million people watched it live, which, given that we started this evening with a show that pulled 1.5 million and got run over by a football match, is quite funny. And then on the last shot, he's in the lab. He's been shot by his own machine, and he's dying, and he walks around this room touching the equipment. And there's genuine tenderness in it. He's stroking a tank. He's looking at the gauges the way you'd look at a photograph. And then he goes down on his back on the floor, and the police come in, and the camera goes up. And it's a crane shot, straight up, pulling away until he's a small thing on a gray floor. And that's the same move. That's the same shot the show has been doing over the desert for 5 years. The pull up and away, the God's eye, the one that says, here's a very small person on a very large surface that doesn't care. He's been running from that shot since the pilot. That's what all of it was. The money, the name, the hat, the empire. It was a man trying not to be small on a big flat surface. And in the last 4 seconds of the show, the camera does it to him one more time. And he doesn't get up. He finally became the landscape. And I should do the machine because it's the most Walter White object in the entire series. The M60 in the boot, he builds a robot. That's what it is. He buys a machine gun and he engineers a motorized mount for it in the boot of a car with a remote trigger and a swivel so that it can shoot a room full of people while he lies on the floor. And it's absurd. It's the most absurd thing in the show. There's a version of that finale that people mock for it, and I understand why. It's Wile E. Coyote, it's a contraption, it's a man who has spent 5 seasons being a genius solving his last problem with a gadget from a catalog. Except that's exactly right. That's precisely who he is. Of course he doesn't walk in with a pistol. He can't. He's not a gunman. He's never been a gunman. He's a man who builds things and lets the things do it for him. He killed Gus with a device. He killed Hector Salamanca with a device. He poisoned a child with a plant. Walter White has at least once in his life done violence with his hands. So the M60 isn't a cheat, it's the character's signature, delivered one last time. And then the thing he does with his hands is push Jesse to the floor and take a bullet himself, which is one of the unmediated physical acts of his entire criminal career, and it's the last one. And then the ricin, which he's been carrying in various forms for 4 seasons. It's been in a cigarette, in an electrical outlet, in a Roomba's worth of hiding places, and it has never once done what it was for. And it finally gets used on Lydia, in a cafe, in her tea, in her seat, with her back to the door, and she doesn't know until he tells her on the phone that the stevia she's been putting in it every single day was the thing. And she's terrified, properly animal terrified, and he tells her flatly, and she's still saying his name when he hangs up. That's the coldest thing he does in the finale, and it's done by post, essentially. He mailed her, and then Jesse, and the choice. 'Cause Walt asks him to. That's the bit people forget. Walt was on the floor, shot, and he pushes the gun over and he says, "Do it. You want this." And Jesse says, "Say you want this." And Walt says, "I want this." And Jesse drops the gun. That's it. That's the entire 5-year argument settled. Because Walt's last maneuver, the very last one on the floor, dying, is to try and make Jesse do something for him. He's still doing it. He's still arranging people. And Jesse looks at it and sees the shape of it for what might be the first time and says no. He doesn't refuse to kill him out of mercy. He refuses because doing it would be the last thing Mr. White ever asked him to do. And then he drives out of there, and that's the last piece of the teacher he ever puts down. Vince Gilligan couldn't stop thinking about Jesse. That's the origin of the film, and it's much smaller and sadder than you'd expect. He was writing the finale. He was actually in the process of writing Felina. And he found himself asking a question he had no way of answering, which was, what happens to that lad? Because the show doesn't tell you. Jesse drives out of a compound screaming, and that's it. That's the last frame of him, and it's a fantastic ending, and it's also an unanswered question, and Gilligan is apparently the sort of man who can't leave that alone. Around the 10th anniversary of the show's premiere, he started mentioning the idea to people. Aaron Paul, who by all accounts never let go of that character for a second, was in immediately. And when Gilligan pitched the film to Sony, the executives in the room said yes, more or less on the spot. They shot it under a fake title, Greenbrier. And it worked for a while. The industry genuinely didn't know what they were making. There were reports about a mysterious 2-hour Breaking Bad film, possibly a prequel, possibly with Cranston, nobody's sure. The New Mexico Film Office confirmed something called Greenbrier was shooting in the region, and that was about all anybody had. There was speculation that it followed the escape of a kidnapped man and his search for freedom, which, well, that's exactly what it is. They told everyone the plot, and it still sounded like a riddle. El Camino came out on Netflix on the 11th of October, 2019, with a limited run in cinemas for 3 days. In my honest opinion, which I've never wavered on, it's a good film that nobody needed, and I'm glad it exists anyway. It's not a story, it's a coda. It's a 2-hour epilogue about a man doing admin. He needs money, he needs a new name, he needs to get out. And the tension is fairly low because we all know he makes it. Because the title is a car and the car is going north. But that's fine, because sometimes you just want to see that a person is all right. And it does one thing extraordinarily well, which is that it understands that Jesse is not free. He's out of the cage, and he is still in every scene in the cage. He flinches at doorways. He does what he's told. There's a bit where someone raises their voice, and you watch a grown man become obedient instantly because 6 months of a chain taught him to. Alaska. The last shot is a car on a road going somewhere cold and empty, which is the correct ending for him because he doesn't need redemption. He was never the one who needed it. Right? Better Call Saul. The 8th of February 2015 to the 15th of August 2022. 6 seasons, 63 episodes. the thing nobody thought could work. And I want to be honest about how bad this idea sounded in 2013, because with hindsight, everyone claims they were excited. They weren't. The reaction was fairly uniform bewilderment. The greatest drama of the modern era has just ended perfectly, and the follow-up is a legal sitcom about the comic relief. Nobody wanted that. It sounded like a cash grab from a network that had found a golden goose and started rummaging about in it. And then it turned out to be, arguably, the better show. And I do mean arguably. I go back and forth. Breaking Bad is more thrilling, and Saul is more true, and I don't know how you weigh those against each other. Which brings us to the Emmys, and this is my favorite statistic in television. Better Call Saul, 53 nominations, 0 wins, 0, not 1. 6 seasons nominated for Outstanding Drama Series every single year it was eligible. 6 nominations for Bob Odenkirk as lead actor, nominations for Rhea Seehorn, nominations for the writing, and it went home with absolutely nothing every time for 7 years. It holds the record. It is officially the most nominated show in Emmy history never to win one. Variety called it the most snubbed series of all time, which is a title you'd rather not have. And Breaking Bad, for comparison, had 58 nominations and won 16, including Outstanding Drama Series twice. I find this genuinely funny in a very Blake way. The sequel to the show that won everything won nothing, and it might be the better show. It's such a perfect joke that if a writer put it in a script, you'd tell them it was too neat. The reasons are mundane mostly. Timing. They ran into Game of Thrones 4 times and Succession 4. Awards are a scheduling problem dressed up as a judgment, and the cast were remarkably gracious about it, which almost makes it worse. Seehorn said they all felt proud of the work they made, and that Peter Gould nailed the final season, which is a hard thing to do. She admitted she'd be lying if she said she didn't want to run up on stage. And Odenkirk, when the finale aired, posted a thing thanking the audience for giving them a chance. He said they came out of maybe a lot of people's favorite show ever, and they could have been hated for simply trying, and they weren't. Dave Porter, the composer, compared it to The Wire, which was nominated twice in its entire run, and won nothing at all, and is one of the greatest things ever made, which is decent company to keep. Gilligan's own shelf, for the record, is not empty. 4 Primetime Emmys, 6 Writers Guild Awards, a Directors Guild Award, which he won for directing Felina. He's all right. Now, will there be more? And here he's been very clear, repeatedly, and I think honestly. His position is that he'd rather leave desire on the table than take it off. He's used a metaphor about a meal, and it's a good one. He doesn't want people to say that was a really great multi-course dinner. But that last thing in the dessert bowl was dreadful, and now that's the taste in my mouth, and that's all I remember. He'd rather disappoint people by not giving them more than by giving them worse. He said he looks around at other storytelling worlds, and he pointedly doesn't name them, that feel like they're squeezing the last dime out of the franchise, and he'd hate that to happen to this. He'd rather leave the party too early than too late. And he said something else that I think is the real answer, which is that after 20 years of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, he isn't tired of it, and he isn't worn out. But he's ready to write a hero for a change, instead of a villain or an anti-hero. That's the actual reason. He's bored of bad men. He has also, being an honest man, admitted the other side of it. He said brutally that if he gets his backside handed to him with the next show and the one after, and nobody wants them and everybody wants Breaking Bad, well, who knows? Maybe then, which is a very human thing to say, and I appreciate the lack of pretense. He's also been asked about specific spin-offs and shot most of them down. A Heisenberg Jr. show about Flynn is, in his words, doubtful as hell, though he clearly adores R.J. Mitha. He's admitted he daydreams about those characters, Skyler and Flynn especially, as we've said. The one that isn't dead is Kim. Peter Gould has repeatedly, carefully declined to rule it out. He's said he needs to give it a rest, that never say never, and that if you watch the Saul finale, Kim Wexler seems like she's got more to do. I'd watch it tomorrow. Now pluribus, because this is the bit that changes the maths. Gilligan made a new show for Apple. It's science fiction. It's set in Albuquerque again, and it stars Rhea Seehorn, and his description of it was something like, no crime and no methamphetamine. And that's a genuinely enormous swing, because Better Call Saul, for all its brilliance, had a safety net. The world existed, half the cast was cast, the audience was there. Pluribus is a man building a whole new world from nothing, with everyone watching, holding him against the best show ever made. And it landed. Critics loved it, audiences loved it, and Season 2 was greenlit before Season 1 had even aired, which is about as strong a vote as a network can cast. He's writing it now. And what that means, practically, is that the chances of more Heisenberg have gone from small to very small indeed. He's got a decade of work in front of him. He's proved he doesn't need the old house. And I've made my peace with that. I think I'd rather have a man making new things badly than making the old thing forever, and he isn't even making them badly. Which brings us to the one bit of actual Breaking Bad news, and it's the thing I'm most excited about all year. Dean Norris announced it himself. It's a book. It's called Do What You're Gonna Do, The Definitive Oral History of Breaking Bad, and it's out on the 17th of November. Norris says it's packed with never-before-heard stories and interviews with the people who made the show. And I know a book is not a television program, and I know that's not what most people want. But look at what we've done tonight. The phone call about the RV, the pitch AMC bought, the 2 actors who were considered for the role, the strike, the plane, the tax incentive, the fly episode that happened because they were running over budget. The making of this show is as good a story as the show. So yes, someone's finally writing it all down, and I've already decided I'm going to be insufferable about it. And the last thing, which is a category of odds and ends that I find genuinely charming, because the franchise has this strange scattering of little bits and pieces around the edges that most people have never seen. There's Snow Globe, which is a 3-minute short film AMC put on YouTube in 2020 when El Camino aired on television. 3 minutes. That's it. It's just a small thing that exists. There's American Greed, James McGill, which is a 10-minute mockumentary that went up on CNBC's YouTube channel a few weeks before the last season of Saul. It's done in the style of the actual American Greed program, the true crime business documentary, with the ominous voiceover and the reconstructions, and it features recurring characters from the show being interviewed in character about their memories of Jimmy McGill and Kim Wexler. It was written by Peter Gould's assistant, Valerie Chu, which is a lovely detail in itself. There's an opera, a genuine opera, incorporating both the Shelley sonnet and the episode named after it. There was a fan edit in 2017. 2 French editors, Lucas Stoll and Gaylor Morriston, spent about 2 years condensing the entire series into a 2-hour film called Breaking Bad, the movie, and put it on Vimeo. And it was taken down for copyright almost immediately. Alan Sepinwall reviewed it and said quite fairly that it doesn't work as a standalone thing at all. To get it down to 2 hours, they had to cut Tuco entirely. And the cousins. And Gus's ending happens off screen, which is, if you think about it, an accidental proof of what the show is. You cannot compress it. There's no fat to cut. Take out the bits that aren't plot, and you've removed the program. And then there's the Crisps advert. I'm serious. February 2023, during the Super Bowl, there was a commercial for Popcorners. It was called Breaking Good. It was directed by Vince Gilligan. And it had Bryan Cranston as Walter White, Aaron Paul as Jesse Pinkman, and Raymond Cruz as Tuco Salamanca, all in character in the desert doing the whole thing for a snack. And it's good. That's the maddening part. It's a genuinely well-made bit of film. The man directed a crisp advert, and it's better shot than most television. I have absolutely no idea how to feel about it, and I've decided that's fine. I want to leave you with one last thing, and it's the detail I've been holding back all night. There's a bronze statue in Albuquerque of a man who doesn't exist, holding a bag of something that isn't real, made of a fictional chemical that's actually a boiled sweet, standing in a city that was chosen by an accountant. And it's there because two unemployed writers had a phone call, and one of them made a joke about a camper van. I keep coming back to that. Not because it's ironic, it's not, particularly, because it's ordinary. That's how these things happen. Nobody sat down to make the greatest television program ever made. A man who thought his meeting had gone nowhere went home and got on with his day, and a network that mostly showed old films took a punt. And a comedy dad that two better-known actors had turned down put on a mustache he decided was impotent. And it went out opposite a football match and nobody watched. And then 13 years later, people are still finding things in it. People are still noticing that the last episode's title is an anagram, still arguing about the plane, still somehow throwing pizzas at a stranger's house, which I'd genuinely like everyone to stop doing. 62 episodes, 5 seasons. That's not very much television when you think about it. There are shows that do that in 2 years and are forgotten in 3. And I said at the start that everything that went wrong with this show made it better, and I've been chewing on that all night. And I don't think it's actually a story about luck. I think it's a story about people who took what they were given seriously. Because the strike happened to everybody. The tax incentives were available to everybody. Loads of shows get made in the wrong city with the wrong actor on the wrong night. What's unusual isn't that Breaking Bad had constraints. Everything has constraints. What's unusual is that a group of people sat in a room and treated every single constraint as though it were a note from God rather than an inconvenience. They couldn't afford an episode, so they made a masterpiece about an insect. They couldn't shoot in Riverside, so they rewrote the show to be about a desert. They couldn't have the format they wanted, so they made the most beautiful-looking program on television inside the format they were handed. And Gilligan said that thing about confidence being overrated, that too much confidence can stop you from second-guessing yourself and pushing your ideas to become better. I've been thinking about that all evening, and I suspect it's the closest thing to an answer that exists. Anyway, there are a few things I want to do properly in future because tonight was a survey and some of this deserves better. I want to do Better Call Saul on its own. 3 hours of it, at least, because I gave it about 15 minutes tonight, and that's frankly a bit rude to the best written show in the franchise. Chuck alone is worth an hour. Kim's worth 2. I want to do the Gus Fring question properly. Everything Chile implies and refuses to confirm. Santiago, Schuler, the Generalissimo line, the missing records, all of it laid out end to end so you can decide for yourself. I've got opinions I didn't have room for tonight. And I'd love to do the real history underneath all of it. The actual meth years in the American Southwest, the DEA of that period, what Albuquerque was really like while all this was going on, because the show borrowed more from the world than people realize, and the world is stranger, so. That's tonight. Thank you for staying up with me, if you did. And if you went out somewhere around the Salamancas and you're only hearing this bit because it's still playing in the morning, that's all right too. That's what this is for. The stories will keep. They've kept this long. Sleep well. I'll see you next